Hey guys, this is Frankie Edgar, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 127. It's Wednesday, the 7th of June. Dennis Schrader here with Kasper Rosalowski. And an interesting week in the world of MMA this week, Cass.
A lot of controversy. Everybody's talking about this Demetrious Johnson situation. And guess what? Surprise, surprise. Of course, we'll be talking about it as well. Surprise to absolutely no one. It's a sexy show. Sexy times here at Submission Radio headquarters. We've got a bunch of fun guests for you. We've got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson returning to the program. Haven't heard from him in a while. We always love having him on. But he's got a bit of a bum knee, a bit of a knee injury. So we want to know what's going on with his knee. When is he coming back? Who's he fighting next? Those kinds of things. It was at the UFC Fighter Athlete Retreat, so hopefully he'll give us a couple of fun stories. It was in Brazil. It was all over the place. We've got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Lorenz Larkin is fighting at Bellator 180, taking on Douglas Lima for his first world title. Exciting time. So we got Lorenz on the program. Never spoken to Lorenz before, so I'm actually really excited to speak to the man. A lot to ask him. He's, I still always, when I think of Lorenz Larkin, I mean, I think of his exciting fight styles, but I also think of when he did the weigh-ins and he was dressed as Ultimate Warrior. I don't know why that always stuck out to me. So a lot to ask Lorenz. And then Coach Wink, Mike Winkeljohn, always a cornerstone of Submission Radio programming, coming back to the program. Holy crap, there are a lot of Jackson Winkeljohn fighters coming up. Obviously, Holly Holm, Donald Cerrone, Derek Brunson this weekend. Of course, John Jones facing Daniel Cormier in I think less than 2 months. So there's a lot to talk about. And there's more. We got another guest, don't we, Dennis? Sexy times.
That's right. Buffet buddy. Hashtag turkey skin. Damon Martin returns to the program. We're going to be talking about a lot of interesting stuff. Well, in particular, we'll be discussing and dissecting what's going on with Demetrious Johnson and the UFC and sharing our thoughts on that. We'll share some of our thoughts on UFC 212, a couple of the key fights from that. What's next for Max Holloway? What's next for Jose Aldo? What is Aldo's legacy after this fight? We'll be talking about that and a lot more. And also, we'll be previewing UFC New Zealand, UFC Auckland. There's going to be a really, really fun card this coming weekend. Derek Lewis is going to be fighting Mark Hunt. Derek Brunson's going to be fighting Dan Kelly. A lot more stuff to discuss. So we'll be giving our predictions, talking about fights that we're excited for and fighters that you guys may have not heard of very often, but guys you definitely need to keep an eye on this coming weekend. So we'll be talking about that. And also, it's going to be a mystery movie review. I won't reveal what it is, Cass. I won't reveal it now, but stick around to the end to find out what movie I'm going to be reviewing and the amount of Timothy Johnson mustaches it will receive. So a lot of stuff happening there. Just a quick reminder to everybody out there to follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, Facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS, and also jump on iTunes if you have a chance and leave us a review. We love reading your reviews. We jump on there, we check them regularly, and it's always nice to see what you guys think of the show. But without further ado, we've got a big show for you guys. We have our first guest on the line, and Cass, I believe you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. And next guest is one of the most exciting welterweights in the world. He's one of Bellator's biggest signings and is set to make his company debut at the ultra-stacked Bellator 180, where he faces Douglas Lima for the Bellator welterweight title. Straight out of Riverside, he's Monsoon. Lorenz Larkin, welcome to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Man, it's going good. How about you guys?
It's going great, and thanks for coming on the program. It's good to have you on the show for the first time. Finally, we got Lorenz Larkin on the program, and before we talk Bellator 180, we were watching a video from a couple of weeks back of you teaching Nikki Benz and Brittany Amber some MMA techniques. What was it like teaching a couple of porn stars some moves?
That was pretty crazy, man. They're pretty cool, though. They're real down to earth, and everything worked out good. I wasn't too embarrassed.
The video was actually a lot of fun, and the girls seemed really nice. You taught them a lot of moves. You taught them the teep kick. You taught them a whole bunch of things. The big question: did they teach you some moves afterwards from their profession?
No. They didn't. I think it was just the MMA for that segment.
Well, yeah, that's all right, because you never know when they're going to use your moves in their movies anyway. There could be a Lorenz Larkin style porn video that's dedicated to you if you become Bellator champion, and then you're going to see some of your techniques being played out by the girls. So not all is lost. Let's talk about Bellator 180. You've mentioned before that you were surprised that you got offered the title shot in your debut fight. Take us back to that moment. Where were you, and how did you find out you'd finally be getting a shot at a world title?
Oh man. Okay. So I was coming back from eating my ass off, to tell you the truth. I had like this I had this big ass breakfast, dude, and I was just on my way home feeling like a food coma, and then my phone rings and it says Scott on there. So I was like, oh shit. You know, when you get a call from him, you already know that it's something good, you know. So I was like, all right. And then yeah, he was just like, well, you ready to fight? You know, any fighter is always like, yeah. Doesn't matter if he's like 80 pounds over his weight limit. He's just like, yeah. You know, everybody says, yeah. So I was like, yeah, I'm ready. What's going on? He was like, okay, how about Madison Square Garden on June 24th against Douglas Lima? And I was like, what the fuck? You know, I was like, what? You mean for the title? And he was like, yeah, for the title, man, right out the gate. And that was it, man. I was hoping he wasn't even expecting a yes from me. I would hope he already knew I was going to say yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have to wait for the thinking. How long did it take to sort of set in? What did you do? You're there in your food coma state. You just had a delicious breakfast. What did that do for your day? When did it sort of sink in? Like, holy shit, I'm going to be fighting for the world title.
I guess the next day. The next day I was working real hard right off the bat to get that food out of me. But no, man. I don't know. It still hasn't really kicked in yet, you know. I'm pretty sure when I get out there, get adjusted, and fight week starts coming up, you know, that's when it's really going to hit me. But right now, you know, I'm just still cruising and still going about my daily routines and training hard.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that it's at Madison Square Garden doesn't hurt either. And I mean, you've had a storied career where you started as a heavyweight, then light heavyweight, then moved down to 185 at the end of your Strikeforce run. You had some tough losses when you moved over to the UFC, but then you found your stride when you moved down to welterweight. Given the lack of promotion from the company, did you ever question if it would ever happen and wonder if you would ever get a fight to actually go for a world title?
You know what, man? I would, you know, you always hope so, but you know, I just go off of actions, you know, and none of the actions were happening, you know, and I felt like, you know, I don't know, man. I couldn't really even tell you still to this day, you know. I really don't know what was the whole deal with everything and why I wasn't promoted and why they want to give me a big fight, you know what I mean, or just anything, but who cares? I don't now.
You've moved on and now you are fighting for a world title, so that's what matters. It's been a few months since you've signed with Bellator. What's the vibe been like for you so far? I mean, obviously you haven't fought there yet, but have you been able to compare it all to the UFC?
Well, I mean, let's see. I'm pretty sure these past 2 months I've been marketed more than I have been my whole career.
Wow.
You know, in UFC, so. I mean, that just speaks in itself. You know what I mean? I haven't even fought yet. And just the marketing that I've been seeing already is it's ridiculous.
We were talking about, obviously, and everybody's talking about the big situation between Demetrious Johnson and the UFC at the moment. Demetrious unhappy. He feels like he hasn't been promoted. He feels like his relationship with the UFC has been an unhealthy one, even though he's been champion for a long time. When you see these things pop up, now that you're out of the UFC, what's the kind of advice that you can give to a lot of these fighters who are still in the UFC who are going through these kinds of turmoils?
You know, it's at the end of the day, you know, it's their career, you know, and if they choose to take it by the horns and do what they need to do, then that's what they need to do. That's the whole thing about this MMA sport that we're in. You know, it's either not only is it a sport where you have to perform in the cage, but you also have to perform outside of the cage, you know, and have all your stuff together. And, to know that what people have the best interest for you and where your career is going to go and the best just in general for you. You know, you can't just depend on your performances anymore because, you know, you see that gets you, you know, I think I read something where he doesn't even have pay-per-view points, you know, and we're talking about and Demetrious Johnson is right now is my favorite fighter of all time, and it's just ridiculous. To me, he is the pound for pound best, period. Not just because he's a little guy doesn't mean shit. He is the pound for pound best fighter I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? And I was all into Anderson and everything, and I like John Jones, and I like all the top guys. But as far as a guy that I've seen that all-around game is tight, it's Demetrious Johnson. You know what I mean? And he doesn't get the credit that he deserves, or he probably doesn't get the money he deserves.
It's a crazy situation. Demetrious Johnson, of all people, he's a fighter's fighter, so it's not surprising that a guy like yourself, looks up to him a lot. We spoke to Ryan Bader recently, who's also fighting on the card with you. He's mentioned numerous times that he sort of feels re-energized and excited again when it comes to MMA. And, has this change and move over to Bellator sort of had the same effect on you, where you're more excited about MMA than you've been in a while, maybe?
Yeah, it excites me just for the simple fact that, I know I'm in a new position, and I know that the people that I work for are behind me too. It's a whole different feeling when, I guess it would kind of be like you working for years and years and years and never getting Employee of the Month. So every day it's the same old, and then when you get, the next work days are like, you feel energized, you know what I mean? You feel like you're getting recognition for stuff, you know what I mean? So that's the position I'm in, I guess I'm probably the same feeling. I feel rejuvenated. I feel excited that, people are behind me now and people believe in me.
And I mean, you were in Strikeforce before, but when you look at the two people, Scott Coker and Dana White, and you look at the relationships that you had with both of them, what do you think is the big difference between dealing with Scott or Dana back when you were in the UFC and now that you're in Bellator?
The thing is weird because I never really talked with Dana like that about business. So, I don't know. I guess the whole thing that really buckles down is, I talked with Scott about business, and we've had conversations and did stuff like that. And I've never did that with Dana, you know what I mean? So I guess you would say my relationship with Scott is a little different than it is with Dana, because I've dealt with different people when it came to my career and stuff like that when it came to the UFC. And, when I come into Bellator talking about my career, I'm talking straight with Coker,
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that sort of makes Bellator different from the UFC is obviously the way that they try and market each fighter as an individual character. We see it, with their intros, their walkouts, the promos, the on-screen packages that play during walkouts. Do you like that kind of stuff? And was that important for you being, to be marketed more as an individual rather than just, another guy in a sort of generic uniform? Yeah,
I always, made my thing about, I was doing it. I'm pretty sure, a lot of people, even me, I've always expressed it about feeling like a robot in those uniforms. There's just no originality, it doesn't, the personality of the fighter or anything like that doesn't really come out of what they like to wear and stuff like that. But, especially coming from, I'm a public school kid, so I got to wear, whatever I want to school. So I don't know. I just never conformed, really liked the whole uniform concept about all that. And I like the whole, and what fighter wouldn't like his own intro and, and stuff like that. It's just taking the time out for every fighter. Like, it is about the promotion, but there is no promotion without the fighters. You know what I mean? Just like there isn't no football without the players.
We saw with Rory McDonald, he had this cool custom video package when he entered where they created this hybrid of a gorilla mixed with a lion. Do you think you'll have any specific requests or kind of creative input when it comes to your presentation?
He had what? What did he have? That was when he fought? I didn't see it.
It was like this video because I think like a gorilla is kind of like his thing, but it's kind of like a lion is also his thing. So they kind of made this hybrid of like a gorilla lion, and it was like roaring, and it was part of his video package. So I'm wondering if you're going to have any sort of crazy things like that that you request from Scott, like, hey, put something on the big screen. What would you request?
That dude needs to figure out what fucking animal he wants to be.
Maybe
I am. What the hell is that? I guess. I don't know, but I promise you, it will not be no cross species type video going on with me.
I'm wondering.
I don't know.
We remember when you paid homage to the Ultimate Warrior prior to your fight against Costa Philippou. You had the mask and the arm tassels. We've actually got the image in front of us. Were you a big WWE guy growing up?
Yeah, I was. Well, I was, WWF, but
yeah,
I was, at that whole stage, I was real big into Ultimate Warrior. I want to just say, man, that was probably my favorite, man. It was Ultimate Warrior. He was the shit.
Yeah, no, he a lot of people love the Ultimate Warrior, and it's so sad how he passed away a day after he got inducted into the Hall of Fame. But I'm wondering, if you get an opportunity at Bellator, would you ever recreate any other of your favorites, I suppose, from the 90s or 80s when it comes to pro wrestling? Is there anything else that you got in your back pocket that people need to watch out for at a possible weigh-in?
Oh, man, I don't know. Who knows? My
Undertaker, a Sting.
I know, man. I might just have what's his name? Paul Bear. He might just come out. Who knows? I might just call out somebody and just crawl out of the cage, out of the bottom of the cage, man. Who knows?
Yeah, and I feel like Bellator is the kind of place where they'd allow that, or you come down from the rafters like Sting, perhaps. So that'd be good to see. Lorenz, we'll talk about your fight against Doug Liam in just a moment, but we mentioned Rory a second. Did you watch his fight against Paul Daley? And just curious, what did you think of his performance? Because he seems like the guy that might be next in line for a title shot.
You know what, man? I seen the fight. His performance was good. And it was really good, but I just wish that I guess a more game Paul would have came, or more game Daly. I wish I would have seen something more than somebody that just got ran through. You know what I mean? When I feel like he could have done better. You know what I mean? I was going for Rory to win, but I just wish that he could have done a little bit better than what I've seen.
And as Casper mentioned, it does kind of look like he'll be the next guy in line to fight the champion. How would you feel about him being your first title defense? Is he a guy that you've always sort of wanted an opportunity to fight in the UFC?
Yeah, I will always have my eyes, on the top guys, and I'll be more than happy to for him to be my first title defense, and especially to shut all the talk of how he's going to take my health or whatever corny shit he said.
Yeah, I mean, he's beaten current champion in like Tyron Woodley, and he's then the number one contender in Demian Maia. What do you think that would say about you if you were to beat him and, obviously shut him up with all the things that he's saying?
Well, I guess it would say that he won't take my health. And, sorry guys. I can't get it over how corny that shit was. I don't know if he came up with that or he read it on the teleprompter, but I don't know, man. It would just it'll feel good, man. Probably feel a little better, just to really shut him up or shut up that teleprompter so he never has to read it a day in his life again.
Do you think you'll talk to him about this hybrid mix of a gorilla and lion if you guys ever do fight? Do you think you'll bring that up with him if you guys ever do a press conference? Sort of ask him what the deal behind that is?
Well, we'll see, man, because that's the thing, man. Usually I don't really talk shit about potential opponents or anything like that. I'm pretty respectful, man, my whole career. So when I hear him talk about he's gonna take my fucking health and all this other shit, so I'm anxious to see. I hope he doesn't change that up. I hope he keeps that same attitude, when we do have our press conference or whatever, So I hope he keeps that up so I get to say all the stuff that I want to say, especially about his walkout. Now after I get off look it up on YouTube,
You've got we feel bad because we're giving you ammo now, but do you take that sort of personally? Because you're right, like you're not a guy that talks trash when you face off with fighters. You look away because it's sort of like a respect thing. Is this sort of the most fired up you've ever been about towards an opponent?
It's kind of getting there, man. Because I didn't even know he did that, until I almost like said something to this fan, and I was like gonna be the biggest dick ever because I thought this fan was talking mess because he was like, Rory's gonna take your health, laugh out loud. And then I was like, what? And I was gonna write back, like okay, yeah, we'll see. And then a couple more came through, just like a bunch of emojis, like he's gonna take your health. And then I was like, what the hell is everybody talking about? Because where I watched the fights at, it was like a bar, so I couldn't hear him talking after. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just watched the fight, and so then when I finally seen it, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I was like, "How corny was that? Like, who says that?"
Well, another big change for you going into this fight will be that for the first time in a long time, you won't have to wear Reebok. How do you feel about that? And were you looking forward to being able to wear your own clothing and having your own sponsors? Yeah,
it's freedom, man. I get to choose who goes on me. You know what I mean? It's I don't have to have somebody tell me what goes on me. So that's just a big deal in its own self. I get to wear what I like. You know what I mean? It's not, for me, it's not all about the money. You know what I mean? It's about what I never want to be in a situation where I wear something that I wouldn't wear outside of the cage. You know what I mean? So my sponsors are going to be something that I'm really involved with, inside the cage and outside of the cage.
Do you mind if we ask, Lorenz? Because obviously there are sort of mixed feedback as far as what the sponsor market is like. Some people say that it kind of dried up after the Reebok came in. A lot of the brands that sponsored MMA fighters kind of went away. What's the landscape like, and how much can you stand to make in your Bellator debut? We're always from the sponsorship. We're always curious about how that sort of translates.
We'll see. I'm dealing with a lot of people that haven't really dealt with MMA before. So, I'm anxious and excited to be working with some of these new people. So, we'll see when everything finalizes, but I know most of my sponsors are going to be people that probably never even sponsored an MMA athlete before.
Well, after your last fight against Neil Magny, you mentioned how you didn't feel any pressure because you were flying under the radar. You weren't high up in the rankings, and there wasn't much of an emphasis placed on your fight. This time, you're fighting for the belt in your debut. You're on the pay-per-view card. It's Madison Square Garden. How do you feel about that? Is there? I suppose there'd be quite a bit extra pressure having the extra spotlight on you. How does that kind of affect you? Do you feel any effect over it? And knowing that Bellator is investing so much in your debut?
No, man. Still no pressure. I think I'm gonna feel more pressure when I defend the belt. You know what I mean? Then right now I just feel like he has all the pressure. I'm the UFC guy coming over, and everybody's like, show him, what you're all about. That it's all that type of talk. You know what I mean? So right now I don't feel the pressure. I just feel like it's just another fight. I'm pretty sure when I get the belt, then I'll have some pressure on me. Because then I'm gonna have something that people want. But he has what everybody wants, not me.
And Lorenz, we really appreciate the time you're giving us. We'll let you go in just a moment. Just a couple more questions. Just talk to us about him as an opponent. You face a lot of incredibly tough guys across heaps of weight classes. How does he sort of compare to your past opponent stylistically? Do you think he presents anything new? And how would you see this fight playing out?
The thing is with him, man, is the good thing I feel about this fight is he's not going to show me anything I haven't seen before. You know what I mean? And, he's just tough, and that's hard in itself. There's not too many, I know it's weird to say that in MMA, but there's not a lot of tough guys, you know what I mean? There's a lot of fighters. There's a lot of tough guys, but, he's tough and he's champion for a reason, and he has a lot of skill to him. And, but the only thing is, I fought a lot of guys like him in the past. You know, I fought heavy punchers. I fought guys with good stand-up. You know what I mean? I fought guys with good jits. You know, so it's nothing that I don't think I've seen. You know, his style is something that I've seen before.
Well, let us ask you this. We saw you told Luke Thomas that after the fight in New York that, you know, assuming you go out there, you win, great performance, you are the new champion, that you'd like to have a big 2-pound supersized Snickers or Reese's. Have there been any advancements in that department, Lorenz? Have the movers and shakers there been made aware?
Oh, yeah, man. They already know. I have a special room for me, and it's going to be a go, you know what I mean? It's right after the fight. I'm getting escorted. See the doctor, right from the doctor. I've already have it in my contract that I get a personal escort to this back room. I cannot give you the details of where this room is located, but it will be fully stacked, and it will be all that for sure. There'll be a room full of diabetes in that room for sure.
I love it. A secret room in Madison Square Garden full of treats. That sounds pretty impressive. Now, before we let you go, Lorenz, let's get the official prediction for you. How do you see yourself beating Douglas Lima to become the new Bellator welterweight champion?
Man, I'm not sure around, but I do know that it's going to be one of those rounds where somebody's going to start shutting down, and the pain will start coming for sure. It'll be a total tide change for sure.
All right, well there you go. We can't wait to see it. The matchup is Lorenz Larkin versus Douglas Lima, Bellator 180, June 24th, Madison Square Garden in New York. Follow the man on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat at @_monsoon. Lorenz, we're happy to see you finally being promoted the way you deserve, and happy to see you in this title position. So we can't wait to watch it. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and we really appreciate it.
All right, thanks guys. I appreciate your time too.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is a friend of the show who just so happens to be one of the most accomplished coaches in MMA today, with fighters such as Donald Cerrone, Carlos Condit, Alistair Overeem, Holly Holm, and John Jones under his tutelage. He joins us back here on Submission Radio. I am, of course, talking about the man himself, Coach Mike Winkeljohn. Welcome back to the program, Coach.
Oh, shoot. Thanks for having me, guys.
It's always great having you on. Paint the picture for us. Whereabouts are you joining us right now?
Oh, I'm actually I'm at the gym. Still at the gym. Just got done with a workout with Holly Holm, and getting ready to head across town when I'm done this interview.
Right. And I'm just curious. I always wonder about this about you. You're a very busy man. What's a general sort of day at the gym like for Coach Winkeljohn? Do you get there early in the morning? Are you leaving when it gets dark? We imagine the hours would be pretty long.
Yeah, you know, that's pretty much the case. I get there pretty early and get everybody rolling, get the classes rolling and stuff. I try to pick up my daughter from school, so I'm gone in the afternoon a little bit. But like 3 days a week, I come back and I work late. And the other days, I make sure that I have the evenings with my family. So, but it's worth it. A lot of hours. I enjoy my job. Don't tell the guys. I could be sitting behind a desk every day, and that'd be like a nightmare.
Oh, yeah, sitting behind a desk would absolutely suck. Well, you mentioned Holly Holm. Talk to us about her, because obviously we want to know how she's doing. We know, things haven't really gone her way recently. She's coming off her third loss in a row. How long did it take her to sort of bounce back mentally from dealing with another defeat, and where is she at the moment, Coach?
She's great. You know what? A couple things. She had the title, and it was a game of inches when she lost to Misha. I never should let her fight Shevchenko. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that I won't reveal, but she didn't let her fight. And it took me a couple rounds to get even that out of Holly's head, fighting Lin-MMA, which I thought we won. So it sounds bad, 3 losses, but she's fighting at the highest level, and she's on her way back. I think people are going to be real surprised by what she's got, up her sleeve here in Singapore.
That's the big next one. I mean, her fight with Betch. It's going to be a fun one. What do you think about the matchup, and how do you see this one playing out?
Oh, I think Holly's going to stop before the end of the fight. There's no doubt about it. I think Holly can just pick her apart when she wants in many ways. Got a lot of new tools people haven't seen before. Betch is as strong as they come. She's a counter puncher. She punches hard. She comes in. She's very good with a double underhook, and she likes to press people against the cage and tries to control this pace that way. Hopefully we have we do have a plan to defeat everything she's got coming to the table with.
Yeah. You mentioned that you believe that Holly's going to stop Betch. What is it that makes you visualize a stoppage? Is that something sort of specific that you've been working on this camp? Maybe, I guess, extra sort of tools to finish the fight?
I think she's going to some new tools, but it should become a bloody mess in Holly's advantage that will play out as the fight goes on, and she end up knocking her out.
The fight will be going down in Singapore. How do you feel about that? I mean, we know Holly got a big win, obviously, here in Melbourne in Australia. Now she's back on the road going up to Singapore. Are you a fan of her fighting in Singapore? Will you be coming with her and checking out some of Singapore's nicer sort of areas?
Oh, yeah, well, I'll definitely be there. There's no doubt about it. I have to be there. I'm not sure I definitely have to be there. For my own good, I'm not sure if Holly needs me, but she's a smart girl. But I'm just there for the fights. In fact, I'll be on a plane the very next morning and stuff. So I'm sure I can enjoy Singapore. But if I was going to go there, I'd go there on a vacation with the family. There's no doubt.
Just curious, do you ever take vacations, Coach? Because you have so many fighters, and it seems like between you and all the Jackson Week staff, you guys sometimes you go one place. Greg Jackson, oh my God, I forgot his name. Greg Jackson goes to another place. It seems like you guys are always so busy. Do you ever take a vacation? If so, where do you go? What do you do?
It's actually been a while. There's no doubt about it. I've had three different week vacations booked to Hawaii, and I've canceled every single one of them over the last year and a half, and I'm kind of irritated about it at the moment. So I'm glad you kind of ruined my evening, bringing up the fact that I haven't had a vacation in a while. Jerks.
I'm not sure if you said Hawaii or if I misheard you, but if you didn't, where would you go, or where were you supposed to go? If you could go to a vacation now, what's the dream idea?
Well, it depends how much time you had, but I really like the island of Kauai and Maui over there in Hawaii. And Australia is just so far, and I can never afford a 2-week vacation of time. But I'd love to get up there to Australia and hang out with Kyle Noak and his group of friends up there and do some surfing with Kyle. Not that I can surf, but that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and of course, hang out with your best friends at Submission Ready. You left us out, Coach. That's okay. That's okay. We understand what you're doing there.
Well, I know if you guys would hang out with me. That was my worry. You guys got more important things to do.
Oh, come on. Like we wouldn't take you surfing because we're not good at athletic things, but taking you to the bar and having a couple of drinks or taking you to a nice restaurant, that definitely seems like something that's along more our borderline. Oh, shoot. Now you guys have offered, I'll definitely take you guys up on it.
Awesome. Well, looking at Holly, and obviously you can't talk about Holly and sort of moving forward without looking at that last fight against Jermaine. And I just want to mention, I'm sure you've seen all the headlines where Jermaine at this point doesn't really want to come back and fight Cris Cyborg. What have you made with sort of her reluctance to defend her title? And I guess it's an interesting situation that she sort of took that fight with Holly in the first place. And now Jermaine's going back to 135. What do you make of all that, Coach?
Well, it's not for me to second guess what's going on in Jermaine's head. That's a tough one with Cyborg. There's no doubt in my mind, Holly would never turn down a fight. We offered the Cyborg fight a ways back, but she couldn't make the weight. This whole 45 division is new to everybody. But with that being said, you know what? Gosh, you know what? I think maybe Christine needs to be, not in trouble with any kind of testing for a good year first before anybody's willing to fight her. And also, she has been busted before in the past, and it's tough. It's easy for people to say outside, "Hey, you should fight her," but how do I say it? She's not what she used to be. She's chemically changed, and some things just aren't fair on the table. And you can't blame Jermaine for that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Jermaine is getting a lot of flack from people for refusing to take that fight. But you've spoken about your thoughts on Cris before on this program. Do you think people are being a little bit too harsh on her for not wanting to go and fight Cyborg?
Well, people, everybody thinks they know what's going on in fighters' heads, and everybody thinks that they're the best fighter in the world, but they've never even put on a pair of gloves or never even wrestled in a wrestling match. And so the whole thing's quite funny from the outside to watch people that sit there on their computers and type crap. But you're talking about the highest level. Jermaine, she's fought everybody in the world, kickboxing wise. She's had all these MMA fights. She's a talented fighter. And I think she could do well with Cris Cyborg. I really do. I think her range is really good. And if she after the first round, I think she could actually start picking Cris Cyborg apart.
And I'll ask you in a moment what Holly's future looks like in terms of weight divisions. But if we do see her at 45 again in some situation, if she does find herself potentially in title contention in that weight class, you mentioned how you would like to see Cris Cyborg sort of be clean for at least a year without any hiccups. If Holly was offered a Cyborg fight, would you sort of want to wait that time period, or do you see a situation where maybe Holly would take that fight?
I see a situation where I'd rather wait that time period and build it. It's going to be a money fight. That's it. Holly will fight for the money fight. She didn't have that many fights left in her career, and Holly's got numbers. She's got followers. People have a tendency to really like Holly because she's that person. She's a good role model for ladies. She's not. She's that thing that I've said before, that moms don't mind their kids growing up to be like or admiring, because she's a good kid in the block. She's got good values, that type of thing. And because of that, she draws fantastic followers. She's one of the highest in the UFC, even with 3 losses. I think she's probably, you got Conor McGregor, John Jones, and Holly Holm. I mean, that's it as far as people that are looked up on the internet every day and watched. That's incredible. So there's some money that needs to be paid to Holly Holm for the big fights.
I mean, I know you've mentioned previously how we don't really know how many fights Holly has left. Fun fight coming up in Singapore, possibly a few more fights around the corner. But for fans who are sort of looking into the future, how much longer can they sort of expect to see Holly around? Because I think a lot of people don't sort of expect it to leave any time too soon. But realistically, how much longer do you think she'll keep fighting for?
She's got a good couple of years, and there's no doubt about it. It's one of those things. She'll when the passion leaves her, she'll know, and she's always said that. If it always sounds bad, people go, "Oh, she's had 3 losses. She needs to retire." It's like, are you kidding? I thought she beat Germaine for the world title at one weight division higher than she normally fights. I mean, and because I thought she lost a bad decision, you think she should retire? You guys are idiots. Holly's right there. She's as good as anybody in the world, and she's got a lot more fights left in her still.
Do you see her maybe going up to featherweight again, or do you think bantamweight is sort of where her future lies at the moment?
Oh, it's all about the money fights. I personally would love to fight Germaine. We want that title back. We want to fight Germaine for the title. I think that's a good money fight. There's no doubt about it. If Germaine's not going to fight Cyborg, Cyborg can stay clean. I want Holly to fight Germaine, but it's tough to talk about that because I do not want to overlook, Betch Correa, because the girl comes hard, and that's what's in front of Holly right now. So that just wouldn't be fair to even talk about.
Of course. And I mean, we don't want to sort of look past Betch, but the big rematch is with Ronda Rousey. We know Ronda's nowhere near fighting right now, but if she does beat Betch, is that still a rematch that you guys would want to see, that Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm 2 fight?
Oh, we'd love that fight. Yeah, I can't see Ronda taking it, but oh yeah, I'd love that fight, because that would be a good money fight. There's no doubt about it, and Holly would have no problem with that fight.
The other big fight the fans are looking forward to is Jon Jones making his return at UFC 214. Now that the fight's been confirmed, how is the training going, and how is Jon looking at the moment?
Oh, he's looking fantastic. He's looking great. His ground game's there. He's working with the guys from Gracie Barra, Barata Freitas, and Tusa, and the guys got him just looking so good on his grappling. Izzy Martinez has got him looking fantastic with his wrestling, and he's taking Daniel Cormier down last time. He's going to continue to do it this time. In this fight, same thing. His stand-up's looking really good. He's working on getting some more strength in his tools. He's got this gigantic toolbox. You don't know where he's coming from. You know if he's going to elbow, if he's going to punch, if he's going to kick high, he's going to kick low. He's really hard to figure out, but now he's starting to get the belief, a little more snap, a little more power in everything he's doing.
What kind of weight are we looking at for Jon coming into this fight? Because one of the big stories at UFC 197 against OSP was, Jon took up powerlifting, he got really big, he put on a lot of muscle. And I remember speaking to you after that fight, and I think you sounded like you weren't maybe the biggest fan. You thought that maybe it hindered him a little bit. Are we sort of going for something in the middle? Is he going back to his original weight, or is he going to stay big for this fight? What's the aim here?
Well, he hasn't been doing the powerlifting as such, so that has changed. So we're kind of going back to the normal workout schedule that he's done before in the past. So back to normality that way. With that being said, I think Jon's also getting a little bit bigger as he's growing. So, but it's a good strength. It's better for fighting. It's better for what he needs to do. The strength he's building is for the explosives needed in the cage.
And as a team, obviously you've been there through, John Jones beating the best of the best in the division, and a lot of people consider him the greatest fighter of all time. But against that OSP fight, even though he completely dominated, people said, look, there was something a little bit different about John Jones. Maybe it was cage rust, and here he is coming off another long layoff. And I guess that doesn't usually work to any fighter's advantage. Is there any concern on your part, or anything that you've sort of focused on to sort of limit any potential cage rust?
Well, he gets that from sparring. He gets that from coming in and doing it and stuff. John mentally is probably the best fighter we have at handling the pressure and rising to the occasion. A lot of people say that about OSP, but honestly, I think John could have finished him, but John's getting so smart. It's kind of like, well, why should I stand right there in that range to get punched and engage when I don't get hit? I'm not sure. You can count on one hand how many times he got hit in that fight, and at that level, that's pretty cool. To win a gigantic fight in essence and not get hit. Nobody has got a problem with Floyd Mayweather working his defense and being in the right place at the right time. So it's just kind of funny. People just like the wars. They don't like people just like, I won. Give me my money, and my brain is better for it.
Well, Dana White, he was a bit reluctant to give him the spot in the main event, and he even put Jimmy Manuwa on the same card as a bit of like an insurance policy if something happens to John Jones, if he pulls out, if some other controversy happens. I mean, you've been watching John train, you know where he is right now. Lay it down for us right now, Coach. Is there any chance John Jones will be exiting this main event, UFC 214 in July?
No, he won't be exiting it. No, John's getting his title back. Well, the title he never lost. Yeah, it's he's walking out with back with being a champion of the world again.
What is that like for you? I mean, this is probably a moment that you've been waiting for almost as much as John Jones. Obviously, he's the one that's going to be stepping in there, but for so long, John Jones, regardless of any controversies, he's still been looked at as the champion. And with OSP, it was for the interim belt, but now he's going for the real thing. Like you mentioned, the title that he never lost. What's it going to be like for you to sort of hopefully potentially see him raise that belt up at the end of the night?
That'd be great. It's a long time coming. There's no doubt about it. It's crazy to be training him and damn it, we went through all that and something happened. We're not able to fight and a lot of disappointments and stuff. So the team's been working really hard on everything, and so that'll be nice. Be a good payday for everybody as well. So that'll be nice. But John needs to just go out there, do his job, and he will, and continue on a streak that will go down in history as being the best fighter of all time.
And I think it'll be nice for fans as well just to see him back in there. It's been so long since they've seen him fight, and he's just such a big part of the MMA world and the light heavyweight landscape. So a lot of fans will be excited to see that. And I know we've spoken about their first fight, John's and DC's, but there's a little bit of controversy that went around when they did the press conference and John Jones admitted he beat DC after a weekend of cocaine. It was all pretty funny, but some people were pretty shocked about it as well. How do you react to something like that when you hear him say that? Did you know this before he said it at the press conference?
Well, John talks a lot. So, because someone says something doesn't mean it's true. And, it's kind of like, it's on the internet, it's true. Or, something he said something, so it's true. Or emotion that Donald Trump tweets, they think the thing's true versus wanting to do the best thing. So, it is what it is. John, in the past, did party a lot. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But he's focused on his training in a big way in this fight. And I know he's tested a whole bunch. So, he's as clean as anybody in the sport is. And he's going to go out there and dominate this fight.
Does it sort of change the way you look at his performances? Like, obviously, we weren't there. We don't know what John did, but according to him, he was doing a lot of partying before the first fight. Does it kind of if it is true, does it amaze you as a coach that he was able to beat, one of his stiffest challengers, Daniel Cormier, who was an extremely tough opponent on, still sort of having things like that part of his life back in the day?
Well, again, like I said, he had been known to party and stuff, but I can't say he was partying like crazy before the fight. Again, that could just be talk and stuff. So I don't know because I didn't hang out with him. So I can't say he was or he wasn't. But apparently everybody believes it because they believe what they read. And does it really matter? He won the fight.
Well, let's talk about this fight because it's a different Jon Jones, more focused than ever. How do you see this rematch going? Is it going to be a continuation of their first fight, or do you see it playing out much differently this time around?
Oh, I think it's definitely a shorter version of the first fight. But, playing out a lot the same way. I think Daniel's going to get frustrated because he can't get to a takedown. He's going to get frustrated because he can't get the big bombs like he used to. And there's going to be some frustration on his part. And then what we're working on is a lot of fear of him doing these things because he's worried about running into all these different tools that Jon has.
And you mentioned you believe it's going to be shorter. It sounds like you think that you're envisioning a finish in this fight.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Jon's focus is on point. I think Jon, like I said, when Jon gets on top of somebody on the ground, it's always a bloody mess with his elbows, etc. He got great submissions from there too, and Jon can take Daniel down like you saw last time. There's no doubt about it. But on the way, there's a lot of strikes that Daniel's going to run into before he gets taken down.
And mentally, I mean, when you see what goes on between them, the press conference, the trash talk, do you think mentally this will affect Daniel Cormier going into the second fight? Because in the first fight, we know that emotions were flaring up and Daniel Cormier kind of wanted to prove he could take Jon Jones down and kind of abandoned his game plan for a bit in that first fight. Do you envision in the second fight the mental game may again affect DC as much as it did in that first fight?
I think it'd be the same thing. I think that people can say that the mental game affected him, but I think it's just Jon Jones' performance. I think that that's going to be the same. Jon's just going to be a step ahead of him on it. I think he's got more tools, and I don't think the mental side of it's going to be as any different than it was in the first part. Daniel's as tough as they come. He's mentally very strong. He's a likable guy. I really like him as an individual. There's no doubt about it, but he's not going to be Jon Jones' fight.
And we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but if Jimmy Manuwa wins, who do you think would make sense as the next challenger for Jon Jones? Jimmy Manuwa or Alexander Gustafsson? As a coach, do you have a preference?
Well, I care less either one. Honestly, I think they both give the same but slightly different look and stuff. I'd like to see him get that rematch with Gustafsson, and this time he's training. I think Alexander's gotten better. There's no doubt about it, but so has Jon Jones. I actually would kind of like to see that one myself, just because people said the first fight was so close. But I know behind the scenes that that fight wasn't trained. I'm not saying anything about anything else, but he just wasn't in quite the same shape to let the same combinations go, to do the same kind of second steps on his takedowns, etc.
Sure, yeah, that's crazy because, I mean, Gustafsson, he's been talking to the media a lot about that fight and how the second one would play out. So am I right in assuming you'd see the second rematch playing out a lot differently to that first fight they had?
Oh, yeah, I think he'd finish him, no doubt about it. I just wanted it to be a big fight. I think both guys, DC in this fight, Jon and Gustafsson in the next fight, all the guys, I just want them to I have no problem with them doing whatever, talking the way they talk behind the scenes, whatever can get more pay-per-view sales, whatever can make these guys more money, and sell the fight. At the end of the day, that's what you got to do. But I definitely see it being a shorter fight and Jon finishing him.
And just curious, Coach, how much longer do you think Jon Jones does have it at light heavyweight? There's always the not even rumors, but more so talks, I think, anticipation of Jon Jones eventually conquering heavyweight. And he sort of had that list at some point where he wanted to face Daniel Cormier, he wanted to get the Gustafsson rematch. And I think that list is sort of slowly coming to an end. Do you think we're sort of around the corner from seeing Jon Jones go to heavyweight, or do you think he sort of has more to accomplish at light heavyweight?
I think he's got a little more to accomplish at light heavyweight. I think he could go to heavyweight. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But he's got a little bit more to light heavyweight. And then, but when he's ready to go for it, hopefully it's a super fight. Same thing, something that motivates Jon Jones, he'll probably pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Coach, we really appreciate the time. We'll let you go in just a second. We just want to ask you about another man from your camp, Cowboy, Donald Cerrone. He's got a huge fight coming up with Robbie Lawler that's going down at UFC 213. I mean, he's coming off a bit of a loss to Jorge Masvidal. We all saw that. How's Cerrone doing, and how's the time off been for him? Because usually we're used to seeing him fight all the time. This has been a bit of a break from him. How has he been in this time off?
Well, he's working on some new tools. He's looking fantastic with what he's doing, and real happy with what's been going on with this training as far as what the guys have been working on and stuff. Brandon Gibson and the other coaches, Frank Lester, have been helping him out a lot with some new tools that will definitely help him with Robbie Lawler that way. Like I said, you might see a new Cowboy Cerrone in this fight, something that he changes a little bit of his attacks, of his defense, a little bit different. He had to. Masvidal kind of exposed a couple things that Cowboy did wrong that we've always known. And these guys have been working on some things, and he's listening and doing real well.
I think when people think of Cowboy Cerrone and Robbie Lawler, they think, wow, this is going to be an epic war. And there is a good chance that it will, but you also think Jackson Winkeljohn, you guys are very smart. You guys don't exactly tell your fighters, hey, go in there and have a war and suffer a lot of sort of damage to the head. Is there a chance we sort of see maybe a different Cowboy Cerrone that we haven't expected before?
If he was to follow the game plan, I'd always want him not to have a war.
Yeah.
Definitely not fight of the night. Fight of the night's cool from the outside, from the fans' perspective. $50,000 doesn't mean shit when they live 6 months less of their life because of the brain damage. With that being said, when Carlos Condit fought Robbie, which I thought he won, by the way, the goal wasn't to strike and then step back in the center and get counterpunched really hard. But you did. So you never know. Those guys that just have big fighters, they sometimes just want to throw down. Cowboy's been known to throw down. Robbie Lawler's always known to throw down. So it can be any and all of the above. I would prefer to hit and not get hit.
All right, Coach. Well, we appreciate the time. Before we let you go, just one final fight I want to ask you about. Derek Brunson. He's got a big fight coming up in New Zealand this weekend against Dan Kelly. What do you expect from this fight? Dad's Army has been able to beat Rashad Evans. Derek Brunson has had a couple of losses back to back. How do you see this fight playing out? And mentally, where is Derek Brunson going into this one?
And will you be there in New
Well, I'm
Zealand?
going to say right now, you know what? No, I'm not going to be there in New Zealand. Actually, Derek didn't make it into camp at this point. He stayed in North Carolina because of family issues, that type of thing was easier for him. So we haven't seen a lot of him, but I can tell you, from behind the scenes what Derek Brunson's capable of. And I think Derek Brunson's capable of beating anybody in that division if he's on, which is a few things. He can take anybody down. He's one of the best athletes I've ever coached. And a great guy. So I see it going, well for Derek Brunson just because of his natural ability.
Well, there you go, guys. As always, a plethora of really fun fights coming out of the Jackson Winkeljohn camp. A lot of things to look out for. Make sure to follow Coach Wink on Twitter at MMA Coach Wink and go to jacksonwink.com to learn about how you could sign up for the ultimate fan experience and, of course, train in the gym. There's bunk beds, there's dorms, and there's always a few Aussies out there. So it's great to hear. Coach, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it.
All right, guys. I really appreciate you letting me be on the show. Thanks, guys.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
All right, guys, our next guest is the number 3 ranked welterweight in the world, a multiple-time title contender, a 4-time Performance of the Night winner, the real-life Karate Kid, and one of the nicest guys in MMA, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. It's a pleasure to welcome you back to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Oh, man, going great, man. Back into training. Knees feeling a little bit better, and still aches every now and then, but we're getting back in the swing of things. I can't wait to step back out there in the octagon again.
Very good, very good. Well, it's great to have you back on the program. We'll definitely talk about the knee in a moment, but first, we saw you were in Brazil the other week, some kind of top secret project. What were you doing there, Stephen?
Oh, that was so cool, man. Never been to Brazil in my life. But we went to Sao Paulo, and me and Chris Weidman, my brother Tony, it was for Fight Pass and for a TV show in Brazil. It was almost like a fight science type TV show where they worked on, reaction time, worked on speed and your techniques, how much power you have on your kicks and punches. So I did the striking aspect, and Chris Weidman did more of the grappling and the wrestling part of the show. So it was pretty cool. We had 2 days where we spent 12 hours a day just filming and doing these exercises. I went up against, actually, it was like a competition. I went up against a world-class, I think it was a CrossFit guy, champion, I think, and did very well. And it was kind of to see, put us through different tests. and how we, did the tests between each other, who recovered faster, how high our heart rate went up. And it was a lot of fun.
That sounds pretty crazy. And we know Brazil's a pretty awesome place. So do you have any funny or crazy stories from while you were down there that you can share with us?
Man, anytime with Cris and my brother, it was always crazy moments, man. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, we stayed in a really nice area. I mean, outside of that, it can get a little sketchy. But, man, to be honest with you, the best Italian food I've ever had was in Brazil.
Wow.
I mean, the food was phenomenal. Oh, yeah, and that's something I'd never expected. I never expected the food to be great there, and it was unbelievable, man. If you ever end up going, you got to go get you some Brazilian Italian food. It was great.
Wow, I can hear New Yorkers being very upset right now. Like, hey, what do you mean? I'm just curious.
No.
What kind of Italian food was it? Was it pasta? Was it pizza? What was the specialty that you had that was so good?
It was the pasta. And everything was handmade in the in the restaurant. I mean, the sauces were just phenomenal. And the fans, oh my goodness, Cris Cyborg is like a movie star in Brazil. I don't even think he knew that, but everywhere we went, it was Cris Cyborg. Everybody taking pictures with him and everything. Couldn't go anywhere. But I heard one of the most popular fights there in Brazil, it was shown the most, was his fight with Anderson Silva. So everybody knew who Cris was. We couldn't go anywhere without somebody wanting to take a picture and stuff. But it was pretty cool, man. We had a blast, and the fans were just phenomenal.
Wow. And I mean, speaking of Brazil, did you get a chance to watch UFC 212, specifically the Max Holloway Jose Aldo fight? And being a phenomenal striker yourself, what did you think of the striking display in that fight?
I thought it was great, man. Both fighters are very high level. I mean, high level Muay Thai, some of the best striking Muay Thai in that division. Jose Aldo was very explosive. He did throw his combinations, and he always follows up with knee, which landed against Holloway. But Holloway just kept the pressure, man. Uses reach, uses strength, and almost precision, and awesome timing to hit him with that jab cross that dropped him. Ended up dropping him in I forgot which round it was, but ended up finishing him off there. But man, it was unbelievable. I was so impressed, man. Both guys. I felt bad for Aldo because the guy's been a part of the game for a long time and been at the top for a long time. Just to see him kind of, for that to happen to such a great fighter, it kind of stinks. But that's the new blood, man. I mean, he's a young cat. Holloway's 25 years old, got a crazy record. I think he's on like a 10-fight winning streak, 11 now. So, oh man, hats off to the guy.
Yeah,
I saw a thing on social media where he ended up going back home to Hawaii, and he was met up with, the locals there, his family, and they just went crazy for him. So I was very happy for him.
Yeah, it was a great fight, and that was a heartwarming moment when you see, all the Hawaii fans. It's great to see. A lot of people obviously looking at, already who's next, and a lot of people looking at Frankie Edgar as the next challenger to Max's featherweight title. We know you've trained with Frankie a bit in the past. Just curious, from your insight, how would you see that fight playing out? Do you think he could potentially pose a threat to Max's, great momentum that he has at the moment?
I think so. I mean, anybody that faces off against somebody at that high level, if it's Frankie Edgar, Jose Aldo, it's a threat to everybody. To everybody in that division, especially whoever has the title. I mean, I've done some training with Frankie Edgar, and it's so funny for these guys. It's all about the matchups. Jose Aldo beat Frankie Edgar, numerous times, but it's people that have been beaten by Jose Aldo, Frankie's gone up against and just crushed him, So it would be a very exciting fight. Frankie Edgar's going to do a hit move and try and take Holloway down, but Holloway's a crafty guy, man. You can't take him lightly. His jiu-jitsu is great. His takedown defense is great, but Frankie Edgar is a tough cat, and he's been in the fight game for a long time, but you can never underestimate that guy.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic what he's done in his career. Another thing that we wanted to touch on with you, Stephen, I mean, you've been traveling around. You were in Brazil. You were also at, obviously, the UFC Athletes Retreat, which looked like a lot of fun for the people from the outside. And we saw people like Kobe Bryant and some big stars were there in attendance, sort of doing presentations and talking to you guys. But we saw there were a lot of mixed reactions from the fighters. How did you come away from those few days? And what are sort of the biggest takeaways that you, I suppose, have from the time spent at the retreat?
I've actually attended the retreat probably 4 years in a row. The first year, I mean, it's back to back, and pretty much it's kind of the same thing. But everybody showed up, not just to see what else, what they brought new to the table and what they wanted to share with us. But we got to meet the new owners, the new company, WME IMG, which was phenomenal. Everybody there that worked there was just great. But to have all the fighters come in under one roof, there was bound to be some fireworks happening. You know what I mean? Of course, you have John Vellante, who's a party animal, man, and he's walking around everywhere shooting people with water guns, rounding everybody up. And I remember when we first got there, me, Chris Weidman, Vellante, ended up John Vellante bought water balloons. So what we did, and he brought a water balloon slingshot. So the first day we show up, we go out, got this bag full of water balloons and a slingshot, and waited for, I think we were waiting on Ali Quinta to step off the bus. We were just going to soak all the fighters that were going to get off the bus and just take off running. But we ended up hitting more bystanders than anybody, than the people getting off the bus. So they were kind of upset with us. But it was a great time, had a blast. Of course, I know you guys heard about Cyborg and that incident, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was bound for something like that to happen. There was a lot of trash talking going on, between fighters, but I think it was just, just to kind of picking at people. Nothing very serious, except you don't mess with Cyborg. you don't talk trash on social media and then come face to face with her and act like everything's okay. She ended up, I forgot who she hit. But
Angela Magana. I'm just curious. Were you there? Because I know Weidman was like right there, and as I'm thinking, well, you and Weidman probably would have been hanging out together. Were you there when it actually went down?
Oh yeah, man, it was unbelievable. And Chris, he tried to break it up. He tried to grab Cyborg, and Cyborg looks at him in a deep voice and was like, "Don't you touch me!" And he's like, "Oh my gosh, okay, I'm not going to mess with her. I'm backing up." He didn't want to get in the middle of it. We tried, but. It wasn't happening.
I'm just curious. Sorry to interrupt. How did that all start? Because we saw the footage and we saw sort of the confrontation, but we've always wondered, like, what actually led to it? Like, did Cyborg approach Magana? Did they just happen to be walking past each other? What exactly happened?
Well, we were all actually going to the new UFC training facility that they had built, and it is awesome. Full training facility. I mean, the best of what's in today. Cryotherapy machines. I mean, sleep pods. I mean, you got anything you can think of is in this gym. It's really cool. So, from what I understood was Magana. Was it Magana?
Yeah, Magana.
Say her name.
Mm-hmm.
Magana was doing a little bit of trash talking on social media. Now, I understand these two, I think, are in different weight classes, I believe.
Yeah.
But she was doing some trash talking on social media. And I guess Cyborg just didn't let it go. I mean, which she should have. It's trash talk on social media, but be the bigger person, let it all happen. She wasn't going to let it happen. She wasn't going to let it slide. So I think she went up to her and just told her, "You don't talk trash about me on social media." And Magana was kind of like, taking it back there for a second. Was like, "Oh my goodness!" But then she started to grow some balls, I guess, man, and started firing back at Cyborg. And the next thing you know, Cyborg smokes her. I mean, just wobbles her legs and everything. And everybody kind of jumped in and stopped it from there. But thank goodness it was only one shot, and nothing else had happened. But I know Magana was wanting to press charges and everything like that. But I'm not really sure what happened after. But that's from kind of what I saw went down at the retreat. But, the whole tree, all in all, it was good. They had some good stuff. They had some pretty crazy stuff. They had the Bud Light or Budweiser, but I think it was Bud Light guy up there who was actually drunk up on stage. I don't know if you heard about that. Did you hear about that?
Heard, yeah. Apparently people didn't take kindly to him saying, "Hey, be Conor McGregor, be a winner." People were pretty pissed off.
Yeah, man. I'm like, okay. I'm pretty sure everybody here is wanting to win every fight. They want to win. So it's not like they're, "Oh, well, I'm just here just to get a paycheck." They want to win the fight. And he was, from sitting in the stands, you could tell the guy had a few drinks in him. And it was probably like 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, what in the world is this guy doing? So nobody really took him seriously, but that was kind of one of the big talks everybody talked about. during the whole thing is this guy, beat Conor McGregor. If you lose, we don't want you. We're just like, wow, what is this guy doing? You know what I mean? Get off stage. But everything with Kobe Bryant and all the guest speakers were just phenomenal. It was super cool. I was kind of bugging out because, I'm a huge fan of Kobe Bryant. And he's, not just as, who he is, but as an athlete and how he presents himself, now that he's retired. And, he talked about beyond your career and, if it's the fight game or basketball, there's always something that you can do. Put forth your very best effort, just like you did in your training. Do it also in, whatever it is you're going to do outside of the octagon. So it was pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And I mean, Kobe Bryant and being a speaker, that's a pretty cool thing to do. Let's talk about your knee, Stephen, because you mentioned it before, how it's still hurting a little bit. I mean, we know you've had the surgery, but talk us through it. Were you in bed for a long time? What did you do while you were sort of bedridden? Were you watching a lot of TV while you were out of action? And if you were, what kind of stuff were you binge watching?
You know what? To be honest with you, it was as soon as I had the surgery, I was back up on it the next day walking on it.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And it was orthoscopic, so they went in and ended up tearing the meniscus. Ended up tearing the meniscus and ended up tearing my MCL. So that's what is actually taking the longest to heal. They went in, they scoped the knee, took out the meniscus that I had torn, but it's the MCL that's actually taken so long to feel better, which is normal. My brother Tony played college football. He ended up tearing both MCLs in both knees. Wow. And he said it took, for the pain to go away, probably 5 to 6 months. But even after that, you can still feel a little bit. And I think it's mostly scar tissue now. But, for my game, I'm a kicker. Everybody knows that I like to move. I like to kick. It's one of those things where I can kick with it, but if it gets hung up on an arm or a hip and I kind of pull down, but if my foot gets caught in, I really feel it in my MCL. It hurts, and I kind of got to stop for a little bit and let the pain kind of subside before I can start doing whatever it is I'm doing again. So it's just the pain. I think that it's healed, but there's a lot of scar tissue up in there, and got to kind of break it out a little bit. And that's about it. But it's slowly going away. I did some sparring yesterday. Very little kicking with it. Mostly kicking with my left leg. But it's just a great opportunity for me. I always look at the good things about this. Even though I did have a knee surgery, but it's great for me to work on my left side a little bit more, work on my left leg a little bit more. And that's the leg that I mostly had all my surgeries on. I had 4 knee surgeries on my left, and now I've had 2 on my right. My most recent one on my right knee. But it's getting there, man. I'm getting back slowly, and hopefully I'll be able to get back in there and help Cris get ready for his fight coming up.
For sure. Look at you. You're on the sidelines, and the first thing you're thinking about is helping Cris. Really, you make us look like the first thing we're from gentlemen. But while we're sort of looking at positives, I'm wondering, like, even though obviously the last fight didn't go your way, and you've been on such a tear for so long, and you've always sort of had this pressure of title contention on your back. It's always a question of, when are you going to get your title shot, and then when are you going to get the rematch, and things like that. Has it sort of been a bit nice to sort of be out of the spotlight just for a little bit and just kind of take a breather without having so much pressure and expectations on you, and now you sort of slide down the radar a little bit?
You know what? To be honest with you, yeah. I mean, my last, 4 fights have just been killers, and constantly in training camp. Even though they were spread apart, there was no time for me to rest, really, just to kind of relax a little bit and take a second to kind of back off and focus on my buddies that got fights coming up and kind of help them, I had Jake Ellenberger. Next thing you know, it was Johnny Hendricks. And then it was Rory McDonald in the 2 fights with Tyron Woodley. I mean, it does, right now, it feels great just kind of sit back and relax, give your body time to heal up. I took some big shots from Tyron in the first and the second fight. And just to know that next time I step out there, my body, my head, my brain will be 100%. When I get back out there. And I'm itching the bit. To be honest with you, I'm really itching the bit to get back out there again. But right now I'm just focused on making sure that this knee is 100% before I step out there. I know a lot of guys who've had knee surgeries get out there too soon, injuring it again, and next thing you know, they're out for a year, 2 years,
Well, just on that, Stephen, what kind of timeline are you looking at? What can sort of fans expect you to be making a return to the octagon? Do you have a rough idea of a certain period when you'll be back?
The goal, to be honest with you, the goal is to be able to fight in September. I'm not really sure what fights they have in September. Late August, early September is the plan. But we'll talk with my management company, the UFC, and see if we can get something going.
I'm just wondering, September's great. You're currently ranked number 2 in the division. Whereabouts in the rankings are you sort of eyeing? Do you feel like you need to work your way back up the ladder, or do you think the UFC should put you up against maybe a top 5 ranked opponent in order to get back into the title contention as soon as possible?
You know what? That's my plan. I want to fight someone in the top 5, but the question is who. I wanted Robbie Lawler to begin with. Mm-hmm. I know he's fighting Donald Cerrone coming up. Demian Maia, I hear, got the next title shot. Not really sure what Carlos Condit is doing. I don't know if he's back in the training, if he's going to retire. I know there was talk there about him doing that. I would love to fight. Carlos Condit. The number 5 ranked guy right now is Jorge Masvidal. I would love to fight him. Anybody in that top 5, I think, would be perfect.
I mean, Masvidal seemed pretty keen on that fight, and that's a fight that a lot of people would want to see because obviously both of you have very exciting striking styles. If that fight is still presented to you for around that September time period, I mean, it seems like you're happy to accept it, but would that be a fight that you'd be happy to go along with?
Oh, yeah, definitely, man. I mean, he's willing to fight. I know that he had mentioned something on Twitter, and then I answered back, yeah, man, I would love to fight you once the Z heals up, which is the truth, I want to fight the best guys. He went 3-5 in a round, one of the best in the division. To be honest with you, I thought he won the fight, but didn't go his way. But I think we would put on a good show. He's a top opponent, good striking, good Muay Thai, and I think it would just be fireworks.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Demian Maia just before, a man that you shared a limo ride not too long ago. Just curious, he's coming off a big win over Jorge Masvidal. It looks like he's certainly, the number 1 contender at the moment. Looking at his skills and what he's been able to accomplish, how do you think a fight between him and Woodley would go? Do you think he could potentially dethrone the champ, or do you think Woodley's excellent takedown defense would be a bit too much there?
You know what? I really do. Tyron is a very strong opponent. I mean, he's proven he can go five in a round. And but man, Demian Maia gets a hold of him. It's going to be a rough night for Tyron. But I do believe that Tyron can fend him off for those takedowns. He's such a powerful guy. Great wrestling, good takedown defense. Damian's definitely going to have a hard time getting Tyron down. And that's where the whole debate is going to be. It could be a stand-up fight. I don't know if Damian can get Tyron down or not. Maybe he can throw him up against the cage, but he's so explosive and so powerful. I think Damian's going to have a very hard time doing that. And plus, you've seen in the past where Damian in the later rounds get tired because he tries so hard to get his opponents down. If you saw in the Demian Maia fight, even when he fought Matt Brown, the last round he was just done, because he really tries, he puts 100% into trying to get him down. But that's a very interesting fight. It's a very interesting fight and a great fight for both guys. But man, they both have the potential to win. But I don't know. I don't see Damian taking him down.
And it's kind of crazy because currently there is no certainty as to who's the challenger for Tyron's belt. I mean, I know it seems like Maia may get it because he's in a huge win streak, but GSP is always in demand as Tyron wants to be the welterweight GOAT to build his legacy. Who do you think should be next in line for the title?
You know what? I think Demian Maia should get it. I mean, he's beaten some really, really good guys. He's been there. He's taken fights. Hasn't, turned any fights down. He should have had it right after my fight, but you know what? He decided to take the fight with Masvidal. I think give it to him and see what happens, and then maybe give George that next shot. George has been out for a while. Why not wait a little bit longer? But I think George is wanting to fight like January. I think he was talking about it, but and I don't think when he was going to fight Bisbee. Anyway, he was talking about fighting in January. Business like, nah, man, that's too long to wait. So that never happened. So we'll see, man. I think Damian should get it. That's just me. What do you guys think?
Look, I like Demian Maia to get this, but it's kind of a situation like yourself where you were on this streak and there was always that question of like, man, how many fights is he going to have to get before he gets that title shot? I think Demian Maia's been in that position for a while now. Even when you guys were on long streaks, some people were saying, oh, it should be Demian Maia, and he still hasn't had that shot. So I think, look, for me personally, I like to sort of stick to the rankings, and I think you can always do a Tyron Woodley GSP fight. But I wanted to ask you, Stephen, you mentioned GSP. One of the interesting things, and he's a man that you know very well, one of the interesting things that he said recently on the MMA was that if he loses his next fight, he's retiring. It's fascinating because it seems like so much pressure to put on oneself, especially considering how long he's been out for. What do you think about that? And do you think that if he comes back and fights Tyron straight away, do you think he could beat Tyron after such a long break?
You know what? George has been a guy that he's a lifelong martial artist. He's even though he's retired, was in retirement, he's always training. He's always evolving, always getting better. The guy seems to always be in shape. So I think skill-wise, I think he can do it. But what it is not being out there in the limelight, not being in the octagon or fighting from all those people. The pressure, like you said, can really get to people. So I'm anxious to see how if that's going to affect him, whoever he's fighting next, if it's Tyron or if it's Bisping or whoever. Being out that long, it will play an effect whenever you step out in that octagon.
So, Stephen, we've spoken to you before about GSP, and you've told us about the dynamic and friendship between the two of you. But if he was to be put into title contention and win the welterweight belt, I mean, I guess we're back to the question of how would that affect your trajectory towards another title shot? Would you see yourself waiting until he was no longer champion?
I'm 34 years old, and I don't think I have the time to wait. Let's say he does get that title. Question is he going to hold on to it? Is he going to move somewhere else? I don't know. But my goal and something he knows has always been to have that title, to win that title belt. So he is a very good friend of mine. And if that ever does happen, that's something that I would have to talk to him about, call him and say, listen, this is my goal. This is what's happening. Do we want to do this or not? Blah, blah, blah. And mainly I think it would just kind of be up to him. I mean, he knows what my goals are. I don't think he would be like, to be honest, I don't know. Before my last Tyron fight, he told me, I have no interest in fighting you. I've known you for a long time. You're a good friend of mine. I have no interest in fighting you. I was like, all right, sweet. But then he was going up to fight at 185 to fight Bisping.
Yeah.
And now that I didn't win, I'm still there. I'm still there. It still could be possible for me to get that title shot and fight for it again. But if he's the champion, that's my goal, man. So it may happen.
It's a crazy situation, but yeah, I mean, look, not to say that we'd want you to fight a friend, but if it did happen, it would be a phenomenal matchup, obviously, as a hypothetical. Stephen, we really appreciate the time, and we don't want to be too greedy, so we'll let you go. But just quickly, before we do, every time we've had you on the show the last few times, we've always spoken about one movie, and that's the Power Rangers movie, something that you were looking forward to for a very long time. Did you end up seeing it while you've sort of been on the sidelines for a bit, and just wondering, what are your thoughts? Do you have a quick Stephen Thompson review for us?
You know what? I did see the Power Ranger movie. I actually went in there and saw it by myself. No one of my friends or my family wanted to go see it with me. But I'm like, guys, are you kidding me? This is the Power Ranger movie. So I went and sat there by myself like old grandpa. But it was all right. It wasn't that bad. It was all right. I mean, the martial arts could have been a lot better, I believe. And that's what it was based on. When the show first started, it was all about the martial arts. It was all about the kick and the punch and the flip. And I think it just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough of it in there. I don't know if they're going to make another movie, but I understand they had just became the Power Rangers, so maybe they didn't have that skill level there yet. It was almost like the last Star Wars movie that came out. Like, you wanted to see some really cool Jedi stuff, moves and the speed and the lightsaber and the fight scene was just crap.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it or not. It was just crap, man. I was like, what in the heck? Are you kidding me? So that was kind of a bummer. But I did see the Wonder Woman movie, something you guys need to check out, and I thought it was legit. And plus, I forgot her name, the lady who plays Wonder Woman is just oh man, she's so hot. So it makes it even better.
Gal Gadot, you can Google her later, Stephen. You're welcome. Just quickly, we have this thing on the show that when we rate movies, we give a Timothy Johnson mustache rating. So how many Timothy Johnson mustaches would you give Power Rangers, and how many would you give the Wonder Woman movie? Out of 5.
You know what? Okay, out of 5, I would give the Power Ranger probably 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like true mustache with a half a mustache.
Yeah.
The Wonder Woman, I think it would be like a 4.5, almost a 5. I mean, I liked it, man. It get like a good rating, get like an 8.5 in like IMDb.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good 4.5 mustaches.
Well, there you guys go. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. Wonder Woman was a great movie. Guys, you got to follow Wonderboy. You got to follow Stephen Thompson on Twitter at Wonderboy MMA. And Stephen, we hope your knee gets better. We're excited to see who you fight next. And as always, we really appreciate your time for coming onto the program this week. Always fun chatting to you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate y'all having me on, man. Always have a blast hanging out with y'all. So anytime, give me a call, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. We'll let you go. If you're seeing any movies by yourself, give us a call, Stephen, or fly down and we'll keep you some company.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Y'all have a good one, guys.
See you, Stephen.
Take
Bye.
care.
Hey, guys. This is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. It's a pleasure to introduce our next man to help break down the crazy world of MMA. It's a ritual. It's a habit. It's something that we like having on the program. A man... He is a part of a very exclusive club, the Buffet Buddies. And I believe we're about to actually hit up another event in the near future. So we're sharpening our knives. You know, I bring my own cutlery to these kinds of things. I take my life in my own hands. I don't risk it with that shoddy cutlery the buffets offer. But anyway, without further ado, he is, of course, Damon Martin. You know him from his great work on Fox Sports, Nerdcore Movement. The man is just everywhere, and he joins us here on Submission Radio. Damon, it's great to have you back on the program.
Oh, thanks for having me as always, and I cannot wait to tackle another buffet and see that turkey skin go flying.
I've outed myself with a turkey skin. I don't know why I did it. A part of me's proud of it, but a part of me is like, look, the cat is out of the bag, and there's no way people in this world of MMA will never not know the fact that I have this obsession with turkey skin.
There need to be T-shirts. Turkey skin for president.
God, turkey. Without insulting anyone, it almost seems like turkey skin for president might do better than the current president. Anyway, let's jump over. Let's not talk about the politics. Let's go to UFC 212. Let's go to Brazil. Let's get out of America for a second, because UFC 212, while it looks like the viewership wasn't the highest because the prelim numbers have come out, the pay-per-view numbers not exactly out yet, offered some good fights, a couple of really good fights we're going to touch on before we jump onto our next topic. The first one I want to talk to you fellas about is Claudia Gadelha's win over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I mean, a lot of people, including myself, thought this was going to go the distance. I thought Gadelha was going to do it, but I thought it was going to go all 5 rounds. And then bang, first round submission, rear naked choke by Claudia. It was an amazing finish for her. Damon, what did you think of her performance in this one?
I was blown away. I was like you. I thought it would be a decision, and I still had a few questions about Claudia after, leaving her old camp in Brazil, moving to the United States, and working with Coach Chris Luttrell. And he's a phenomenal coach, but again, it's just that, it typically takes 2 or 3 fights for a fighter and a coach to really kind of get in sync and, kind of come together. And I thought she would win. I picked her to win, but I just thought it would take a little bit more feeling out process and things like that. But Claudia went in there looking like an assassin. I mean, she was quick on her feet, and as soon as she saw the opening to take it to the ground, she did. And then she just passed Karolina's guard and put her in that rear naked choke. It was a pretty amazing performance. I think a couple things we learned in that fight is that Claudia is still the best strawweight fighter in the world, not named Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And I think we also got to give credit to Joanna because she went on the ground with Claudia a couple of times during their fights, and she didn't have nearly as much success on the ground with Joanna that she did with Karolina. So I think we see how high level Claudia is, but also give some credit to the champion who has some pretty damn good defensive skills on the ground. But it was a clinic. I was really impressed by that because I thought she would win, but in no way did I think she would go out there and just submit Karolina in the first round.
Yeah, I remember watching the pre-fight interviews and seeing how much smaller she looked. I mean, she's always been in phenomenal shape, but she just looked, even in the face, she looked a lot slimmer. And so, as much as I love this performance, I mean, if you have the two women that, you know, they were sort of fighting for who is the second best in the division at the moment, and obviously you go in there and you destroy one of them, it's a massive statement. She did exactly what she needed to do. I mean, if you're that far away from fighting Joanna Jędrzejczyk, you can't be going to decisions as everybody expected, and she just basically blew her expectations out of the water. I will say, and this is not in any way a knock on Claudia at all, the fight went perfectly, but the only thing that I really wanted to see was how she would do in 3 rounds. I think what should be next for her, because I don't think anybody really expects Claudia to fight for the title next. She's already had a couple of fights. There were great fights against Joanna, but they're far too fresh in everybody's minds. Obviously, you have to step aside and give Rose Namajunas that fight for the moment. But I'd love to see Claudia in her next fight, in a 5-round fight, because I'm still very curious, even though she's proving that she's a finisher now, I'm very curious how that cardio is. Because as we saw in the Joanna fight, and who knows, if they fight again, maybe it goes differently, and maybe Claudia won't even need the extra cardio or the extra rounds. But as we saw, she was doing well in the beginning, and then she gassed, she faded, and then Joanna took over. So I think we see that she's a finisher now. The only other sort of part of the puzzle, this new Claudia, as she described, that I want to see her in a 5-round fight and see how this cardio is and if it's improved in this new Claudia.
Mm-hmm. And with this new Claudia, I'm just really impressed with the mental game as well. A lot of people sort of fold after losing, but it really looks like she's gone back to the drawing board and worked on a bunch of new skills and has that confidence in herself and her abilities. Casper, quickly, I mean, we've spoken about this before. You know, people want to see Rose versus Joanna, but after a performance like that, does Gedalia jump in front of Rose and now get a shot, like you mentioned, 5 rounds against Joanna, or are you still going with Rose as the next title contender?
No, it's got to be Rose. Like I mentioned, we've already seen those fights twice. They were both great fights in their own right, but I think what fans and everybody wants to see is something new, something fresh, and Rose is that fight. It's a fight that people expected to happen for a while. She didn't get the win against Carolina, so Carolina went in there. That was a little bit of a detour. Now we finally got that fight. There's a little bit of bad blood, something that you don't really always see with Joanna fights, other than maybe during fight week when the stare downs get intense. And so, yeah, I think that's the fight that everybody wants to see. I think with Claudia, like I mentioned, she still has certain things to prove. If she can't get in there and finish Joanna, how is that cardio going to be holding up? And I still think that needs to be shown to us before she can go in there. I think that, and that's the thing, it might be tough for her to get into a 5-round fight, because who do you really put her up against? You'd need to put her up against a big name, and she'd have to be in the main event of some kind of card. I don't know who that person could be, but yeah, if they can somehow stick her in a 5-round fight, I'd love to see her cardio.
Damon, from what I understand, Gedalia is getting pretty big over there in Brazil, becoming a bit of a celebrity. I mean, it's really tough, like Casper mentioned, to figure out who could be next for her if it isn't Joanna. But do you have a name in mind, someone that she could possibly main event a fight night card in Brazil with, and sort of show us her ability to stay in that sort of 5-round range if it does go that far?
Well, I think the two people at the top of the list, number one would be Jessica Andrade, you know, the last person to fight Joanna. And, you know, obviously she's still a tough out for anybody in that division. And kind of like with Carolina, you're not really going to lose a contender because they've already fought and lost to Joanna. The loser of that fight's not going to be that much, you know, different than the situation they're in now. And for the winner, it's just a big win over a quality opponent. The other option, in my opinion, would be if Carla Esparza can win her fight in Oklahoma City. There's still a lot of bad blood between Carla and Claudia. You know, they were supposed to fight a couple of times in Invicta. It didn't come together. They had that big trash talking fest. You know, recently when Claudia was trying to fight Carla, and Carla was, you know, trying to come back from her injuries and everything. So I think that either one of those matchups would be good, and I think you could potentially headline a card down in Brazil, especially if it's Jessica Andrade. You put Jessica and Claudia together, two Brazilians in Brazil. It could be a quality enough main event. But I will say I do think Claudia can get back to a third fight with Joanna eventually, because she's been the only person to really give Joanna a run for her money. I know everyone wants to talk about Carolina with that quick knockdown in round 4 or whatever, but the rest of the fight was a blowout. It wasn't like that was, you know, it was a you know, split decision. The only person to really push Joanna was Claudia. So I think Claudia's going to get back there. It's just going to take her a few fights. But at this point, I think we've proven that she is the number 2 person in that division. So if she's that good, she'll eventually get there.
And I mean, the fact is, if she does go out there and does, like you mentioned, win a few more fights, it's just a great story for a third fight, I think, because I think people are willing to see them fight again. I'd be excited to see how it goes. I know that second fight was very, very close, and I'm interested to see how that matchup would play out. But Casper, let's jump to the main event, because before this fight even happened, there was a bit of a discussion. Everybody was sort of talking about Jose Aldo's legacy, what it was before the fight, what it is after the fight now that he's lost. What are your thoughts on his legacy and where it stands now that it's all said and done and he lost to Max Holloway this past weekend?
Well, I mean, look, it definitely does take a hit. When a guy is dominant for so long, people do get used to it, and so it really stands out, and it's magnified when he suddenly loses, especially, more times than he has in his career in the past. Look, I think he's still the greatest featherweight of all time due to his past accomplishment, but the torch, at least in terms of title holding, it's definitely been passed on. And, it's kind of like Anderson Silva when he was dethroned. It didn't automatically make Chris Weidman the middleweight GOAT. And as we can see now, he isn't. Accomplishments like that take time, and it's going to take a little while for Max Holloway. I think the legacy of Aldo is really that he was an innovator and almost impossible to solve or even hurt puzzle throughout many different eras of MMA. He was successful for so long. I mean, for almost a decade, Aldo faced the best there were, and he almost cleaned out the division. If he was a heavyweight, he would have had a Fedor-esque era, and I think the fact that he didn't speak much English has always hurt him, and that makes a lot of sense why he's so big in Brazil and not really big anywhere else. And I think more than anything, this fight certainly shattered that aura of invincibility, even more so now than after the Conor McGregor fight. There's no way, and I'm not taking away anything from the McGregor fight or McGregor's win, but there's no way to claim in this fight that he simply got caught. He had every chance to win. He was doing really well at the start, and he just wasn't able to. So between this fight and the Conor fight, he stands to go down in the history books as more of a mortal as opposed to a god like he could have. But he can take solace in the fact that his 2 UFC losses were to the young kids or the new generation. In his generation, though, nobody was better. And it just happens to everybody. Everybody eventually gets overtaken. And, some people say Conor ruined Aldo, and they blame this loss they blame the McGregor knockout for his performance at UFC 212 against Max. I think that's incorrect, and it takes away from Max's win, because we all remember he bounced back and looked better than ever against Frankie Edgar. I don't think by any means it's curtains for Aldo or his career. I think that Aldo, he's traditionally bounced back strong. After his 2005 loss, he went on an 18-fight win streak, and after the Conor loss, he beat Edgar in even more impressive fashion. So he's only 30. He's been around for a long time, but he's very young. He still has time to find himself in a rematch with Max, or maybe another fight against another potential champ, which, who knows, it might even be Frankie Edgar, and maybe Aldo can be a champion again. So he can still curb his legacy as a guy who potentially lost the throne then claimed it back again. But if I had to predict, I would say Aldo's supreme era of dominance might be coming to an end, or probably has come to an end, and he's been overtaken. But it doesn't take anything away from all his past accomplishments.
Interesting. And Damon, I want to get your thoughts in just a second, but with me, it's like when people talk about Aldo and his legacy, it's like, to me, it's a little bit like, are you guys seriously talking about what kind of legacy this guy has? I mean, a lot of people saying, he has no legacy anymore, blah, blah, blah. But the deal for me is, what he did was incredible in the featherweight division. And no matter what happened with the Conor McGregor fight or what happened after that, he still stands as, in my mind, the man with the most successful campaign in featherweight so far in the UFC and in MMA in general. And what he was able to do with his title defenses and reign as undisputed champion for a really, really long time was incredibly impressive. I think you get fans and they kind of get into this mode where they think people are invincible or inhuman because they win so much back-to-back and don't realize the fact that, this is real life. And in fighting, everything that has a beginning has an end. When there's a dominant champion, no matter who he is, most of the time, eventually they slow down. Eventually they lose. So what you look at is what they were able to achieve. And what Aldo was able to achieve, no matter what happens to him now, no matter how many fights he wins or loses now, it was incredible. And what he was able to put together was incredible. So to me, his legacy will always remain as a very impressive one. And what's happening to him now, I mean, it is what it is. Very tough opponents. In the Max Holloway fight, obviously, he had a good first round, but then Max is able to beat him. But it doesn't affect his legacy to me because of what he's been able to do as a champion, the amount of defenses he's able to have. To me, his legacy is separate, and what he's doing in his career now, well, that has no effect on it whatsoever. Damon, I want to get your thoughts on it, and just your thoughts on how much did this Conor McGregor loss affect his legacy, in your opinion?
Well, it hurt because, for all the past wins that Jose Aldo has had, when he lost to Conor, it was the biggest stage of his career. I mean, he had big fights before. I mean, Frankie Edgar is always going to be a big win no matter when or how you face him. Beating Chad Mendes twice is always going to be a big win no matter how or when you face him. But on the biggest stage of his career, against Conor McGregor, he folded in 13 seconds. So that's always going to hurt his legacy. And then, after putting on a dominant performance against Frankie Edgar to come back and then lose by TKO to Max Holloway, of course, it's going to have people questioning, what you did. He's gone 8-2 in the UFC. When you just say it like that, that's a pretty impressive record. But, it sounds a little weird when you think about Jose Aldo because, you just kind of think to yourself, 8-2, like that's a pretty good record. But then you attach it to Jose Aldo, you're like, well, that's 7 title defenses. That's 2 wins over Edgar, 2 wins over Mendes, Lamas, Korean Zombie. I mean, he's beaten everybody but Conor and Holloway. Is he still the greatest featherweight of all time? I believe he is, but I don't think the gap is nearly as wide as it once was. Because Aldo was the only featherweight champion we ever had. He was the only guy. So who else was there to say there was another featherweight? Conor knocking him out. If Conor would have stuck around and fought a couple more times, I think it definitely would have been Conor. But he left the division, and good for him, doing whatever he's doing. But I think the guy we need to talk about is Max Holloway, because Max Holloway is on an 11-fight win streak. And if he beats Frankie Edgar, I'm telling you right now, if he fights Frankie Edgar and beats him, we may all get back together 6 months from now or whatever and say Max Holloway is now the greatest of all time. And I think you could pitch that argument immediately, because even if you take away the Conor fight, 12 fights in a row, and he beats Aldo and Edgar back-to-back with another win over Cub Swanson. I mean, come on, that would be ridiculous.
The interesting thing here is, there's a lot of people talking about, Max Holloway, amazing. He's on his win streak. Jose Aldo, one of the greatest featherweights of all time. But what these guys both have in common is that they lost to Conor McGregor. Casper, I'm just wondering, for those people online saying that Conor McGregor sort of has taken something away from these guys, from being those ultimate, from Max Holloway, for example, from being the ultimate champion because he was the champion. He gave up it seems like he gave up his belt, but he's beaten Holloway and he's beaten Aldo. How do you sort of respond to that theory?
I think in some ways it can be a bit of a blurred line. Like, I get it. Obviously McGregor beat those guys. But here's the thing. McGregor, he didn't... And I'm not trying to take anything away from him. Like Damon said, it's so close. If he had stayed in the division, rattled off a couple more wins, if he had fought, Edgar, and, really, there weren't too many more other guys for McGregor to face. If he had stayed in the division, we'd be probably talking about him as the greatest of all time. But he didn't. He won the belt, and then he left the division. And I don't think you can... It's kind of like saying whoever holds the belt right now or whoever wins the belt is automatically the GOAT. And I think if that were the case, then we would be talking about Michael Bisping as the middleweight greatest of all time. But I don't think many people, believe that that's the case. And I think that one of the things that makes it so impressive about what Aldo was able to do is that, and we've heard so many champions talk about this before, the pressure, the mental pressure that amounts when you keep racking up those title defenses. And let's not forget, a lot of Conor's fights, even though he did finish him, they were 3-round fights. Some of them, like the Max Holloway fight, for example, he beat him in a 3-round fight. Amazingly impressive because he dominated Max Holloway. In some parts, he made it look easy, and he tore his ACL. So there's not really much you can take away from Conor in that fight, but I will say, if they did have a rematch, and if it was 5 rounds, how does a 5-round fight go? Does it play out the same? Obviously, there's a couple of extra rounds. Who knows? Maybe Conor McGregor comes in and finishes Max Holloway, or maybe it's a completely different fight because Max Holloway's improved so much. They both have. So I think that because Conor McGregor left the division and he didn't face that pressure of constantly going up against the best crop, the guys who have already been on win streaks, and then they come and they face him as hungry contenders, and that pressure constantly, raises exponentially. I think that's why he's just shy of that argument for why he's the greatest of all time. But I think, like Damon mentioned, Max Holloway, he's so close already. If he beats Frankie Edgar, and let's be honest, that's the next fight to make. He's already close there. Maybe throw in a Chad Mendes, maybe throw in a couple of other guys. But he's already beaten most of the division. He's already beaten Cub Swanson. He's already beaten Ricardo Lamas. I just think with Max Holloway, he looks amazing, and maybe he will end up being the greatest of all time. He's 25 years old. He has so much time to sort of lap all these other guys. But I was on Sherdog the other day. They had a great article. I'm not going to take credit, but they mentioned a lot of people like Lyoto Machida, Holly Holm, Anthony Pettis, all these people who seemingly look like they were going to be, reigning forever and ever. Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, so many before them. And, those reigns were cut short. So we'll see how this Edgar fight goes. And then, like Damon said, maybe in 6 months or maybe in a year, we'll be saying Max Holloway is the greatest of all time.
And just for record's sake, I've never been a fan of talking about the greatest of all time. I always found it super stupid. To me, I just appreciate what the fighters achieve in the octagon. And I mean, it's just so subjective. I mean, greatest of all time until when? Until the next guy does something and they're no longer the greatest of all time. I see fans sort of arguing about this, like, how could my guy not be the greatest of all time? And I go, dudes, like, relax. Just be happy that you're able to see some of these performances and streaks. Why? People get so angry when people say, "Oh, well, your guy's not the greatest of all time." Like it's a like it's a put down. Like, for example, if Max Holloway does lose his next fight, well, Max Holloway is no longer the greatest of all time. Well, what does that mean? What? Max doesn't get the respect that he deserves for what he's done before? Does it take away from the fact that he's done all these great things before? What does the greatest of all time even mean? How do you even really measure that? So sometimes these things kind of annoy me when I see fans just going crazy over these greatest of all times and neglecting to respect some of the legacies and fights and great things fighters have done. I mean, there's great fighters out there who may not be the greatest of all time or not be considered the greatest of all time, but they've had some of the most amazing performances that I've ever seen. So where do they fall into that kind of category? But Damon, I just want to quickly ask you, what's next for both guys? Because Aldo, he said he put out, I believe, something along, I'm paraphrasing here, but the best thing about falling down is getting back up again. So it seems like he'll be back in there sooner than later. Not sure against who or where. And Max Holloway, he had that great reception in Hawaii at the airport. And when he got off the bus, that place is going crazy. And the reporters are saying apparently Dana White is getting up there in the next few months and talking about possibly doing a UFC Hawaii. So what do you see as next for both guys?
Well, I think for Max Holloway, it's a no-brainer. It's Frankie Edgar. I talked to Frankie today. Frankie said that that's the fight that makes the most sense. And it's not just because he's kind of the last man standing, but also because, Frankie doesn't do anything but earn fights. I mean, he beat Jeremy Stevens. He mauled Yair Rodriguez. He has wins over, Cub Swanson. And then we know the list. Yeah, Frankie's the guy. Frankie's the one guy in featherweight right now that's available who Max hasn't already beaten. So it's Frankie Edgar. I think either in Hawaii, if they can get that figured out, it would be a massive fight in Hawaii. I know there's some problems with the commission down there. There's something to do with taxes or something to do with putting on a show in Hawaii that makes it much more expensive. I'm not sure if it's insurance or taxes or what it is exactly, but I know there's something that's prevented them from going to Hawaii in the past. But if they can get that done, if not, I think November 4th, Madison Square Garden would be huge. Obviously, Frankie's from Jersey. And who doesn't want to headline a card at Madison Square Garden or at worst co-headline a card with George St-Pierre and Michael Bisping or something like that as the main event? I mean, that's not a bad spot to be, especially if you're getting pay-per-view points. So I think that's a no-brainer. For Jose Aldo, what I'd like to see for him is I hope, listen, he got knocked out, so I don't want the guy to come back too soon because you don't want a guy to, come back with a concussion. But I want him to come back as soon as possible because one of the biggest knocks I have on Jose Aldo's legacy is how much time he's missed. I mean, we talk about he was undefeated for 10 years, but I noted on Saturday night, he stepped into the octagon with Max Holloway. That was his 10th UFC fight total. That's crazy to me. Yeah. Jose Aldo feels like he's been around forever. He's only had 10 fights in the UFC altogether. So I hope that once he gets his head healed up, and again, that's paramount, making sure he's healthy. But once he's healthy, I really hope he books this fight immediately and doesn't sit around and doesn't wait a year to come back. And I'd like to see him fight Cub Swanson. If Cub could beat Jose Aldo, then there's no doubt, no matter how he lost to Frankie or how he lost to Max, he would earn that rematch. He lost to Jose back in the WEC. I know it's not the title fight that Cub wants, but it's a big opportunity to avenge a loss. It would probably be a main event in a fight night or maybe a co-main event of a pay-per-view. So that's the fight I'd like to see. And like I said, once he's healthy, and I want to make sure and say that, once he's healthy, I hope Aldo books this fight immediately because that's one of the biggest knocks on the guy is he fights once a year. He sat out twice for over a year during his title reign. I just want the guy to come back sooner so we kind of see how he comes back from this loss.
I agree with you 100%. It's crazy because a lot of people, I think most people predominantly agree that Frankie Edgar is the next in line, but there are some people who are saying, oh, Frankie Edgar's had too many title shots, give somebody else another go, or give somebody else a go. And it's like, who do you give them? You've got, let's look at the rankings. You got Ricardo Lamas at number 3. Well, Max has already beaten him. It was a fun fight, but Ricardo Lamas is nowhere near title contention. You got Cub Swanson at number 4. I know a lot of people are high up on Cub Swanson, but I think we all agree that Frankie Edgar is kind of done. Like you mentioned, he doesn't lose to anybody except Aldo. And Cub Swanson, he's on a good streak. I don't know how many people are really looking at him to potentially win the belt. He's already lost to Max Holloway, and his last fight his last win was a great fight, but it was against Artem Lobov, not really the kind of guy that you beat and then fight for the title next. Korean Zombie, Jesus, that guy is bad luck. He just tore his ACL and MCL, so he's going to be sidelined for a long time. And he would have been a fun potential title fight somewhere down the line. You got Anthony Pettis, well, he just lost and he's not even in the division. Yair Rodriguez just got steamrolled. Jeremy Stevens, I believe Max beat him a while ago. And then at number 9, you got Brian Ortega. So there really is nobody else apart from Frankie Edgar. And we're lucky that this isn't some fight that it's like, all right, well, he's the guy that we're not really excited about this fight, but he's the guy that's ranked whatever, or the default guy, so we'll go with him. This is a great fight, and this is a great test for Max Holloway. And like you mentioned, this is one that could potentially put him really close to being the greatest featherweight of all time. And I agree with you 100% on Cub Swanson for Jose Aldo. Even if he's not fighting for the title, if he's able to avenge that Jose Aldo loss, that is a massive win for Cub Swanson. That's a massive feather in his cap, and hey, it's a big step up over a guy like, say, Artem Lobov, and I think that's the kind of statement you need to make if you are going to put Cub Swanson in another title rematch.
And just mentioning Ricardo Lamas, I'm really pumped. Just a little side note, I'm really pumped that Jason Knight is replacing Korean Zombie, because I reckon there's going to be a really, really fun fight over there at UFC 214 in Anaheim. It's a real shame the Korean Zombie's out, but Jason Knight, he is an interesting guy, and no doubt about it.
I love that fight. I love that fight. Yeah, Jason Knight, I love that fight.
It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait. The Buffet Buddy's going to be there live, so, so much stuff is going to be going down. Maybe I'll offer Jason Knight some turkey skin as a peace offering. Who knows? He might be the kind of guy that goes for that kind of thing. You never know. We've got to get him on the show, talk about it a little bit in the future. But anyway, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the news that's kind of taken the MMA world by storm in these past few days, and that's Demetrious Johnson's interview with Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour. The interview was pretty eye-opening, and DJ really went out there and revealed a lot of stuff about what's been going on between him and the UFC guys. I want to break it down a little bit. I want to read out a few parts and sort of go through them and get your opinion. The first one was Demetrious talking about him and Dana White discussing this TJ Dillashaw fight. He said, after telling Dana my reasons, Dana angrily told me that I'm fighting TJ once again with no other options or say in my career and against the plans we had previously laid out. He went on to further say that if I didn't take the fight against TJ and drop Borg as the opponent, he would get rid of the entire flyweight division. He said, this is for TJ, and I'm taking away TJ's opportunity. The fact that he feels that what I should do in my career is for TJ tells where his priority lies. Casper, when you hear DJ talk about this, or you read some of the excerpts from the interviews and see that Dana White threatens to get rid of the entire flyweight division if DJ doesn't take this fight with TJ Dillashaw, what's your reaction to something like that?
I mean, at this point, it's not even really that surprising. We've seen these kind of feuds, and we've seen this heavy-handed approach from the UFC time and time again. I think when you think of heavy-handed, you think of even last year with Conor McGregor, where he didn't, he wasn't going to turn up to a press conference, so the UFC took away a fight that I don't want to say everybody was looking forward to, because around that time, people were like, McGregor, Nate Diaz, I don't know if I really want to see this. But nevertheless, they took away their biggest draw because he didn't want to attend a press conference. So in some ways, it's not that surprising, but man, what a way to shit on everybody in that division. To basically, they're using an entire division as leverage, as a bargaining chip for one fight, which, I mean, I want to see TJ versus DJ, but is it really worth that kind of negotiations? I mean, they've basically given a middle finger to everybody in that division, showing them how useless they are. That, listen, I'm going to get rid of this whole division just with the snap of my fingers because I don't like where this is going. And really, in a time of fighter unrest in the UFC, in a time where the UFC hosted an athlete's retreat and it largely backfired on them, the majority of the feedback was negative. and theoretically, by all accounts, it was supposed to be a positive thing, and it didn't really work out at all. It's only going to bring up more cases. Excuse me, I'm dying. It's only going to bring up more cases of fighters unhappy with the UFC, even if it's lower guys. There are guys that are on their way out of the flyweight division, really close to retirement. Guys like Neil Seary, guys like Ian McCall, and once they're sort of away from the UFC, where the UFC can really touch them, they're not really in charge of their careers anymore. A lot of these guys are probably kind of going to come out and speak up. And it's just, from a PR perspective, it looks absolutely terrible for the UFC, using this heavy-handed approach. It's kind of like gambling your kids in a game of poker. It makes you a bad father. And so for Dana White to say these kinds of things, the flyweight division has had a hard time as it is, and when you have the head of the UFC or one of the sort of faces of the UFC basically showing you how, according to them, worthless the division is, it's certainly not going to help anybody to want to watch the fights or buy pay-per-views with them.
Damon, if I'm looking at it, it's almost like someone coming into my town and saying, do this, so the whole town gets it. If I'm in the flyweight division, I'm like, man, this is my soul, this is my livelihood, this is this is my job, this is how I feed my kids, and it's gonna really rely on the fact whether or not Demetrious Johnson takes this. He's actually threatened to take away my job, everybody else's job in the flyweight division. I'd be pretty upset if I found this out and I was in the flyweight division. What are your thoughts on Dana threatening to abolish a whole division if DJ doesn't take this fight?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit ridiculous for one, but I also think, and this probably sounds strange, but I also think this is Dana being Dana. I don't think he's actually going to get rid of the division. I think this is him being angry and lashing out because Demetrious wouldn't take the fight he wanted him to take. It's just, these are the moments when, what Dana says can come back to bite him, when a guy actually, publicizes what he said. So you have to be careful with things like this, because at this point, Dana still has power, of course, but he's not the ultimate, he's not the end of the road. Ari Emanuel and Patrick Whitesell are going to be the end of the road, and, they'll still ultimately make the call. Now, maybe they back Dana up on this and say, do what you want. But who knows? Behind closed doors, they could say, whoa, we're not going to get rid of an entire division because you have a disgruntled relationship with the champion. I have no idea. I'm just saying, I don't know that that's, there's a possibility that happens. I don't think they're going to get rid of the division. Listen, I said, and I think I may even said it when we talked about this when I was on the show the last time. I said that, listen, I don't like the TJ Dillashaw-Demetrious Johnson fight, not because, TJ hasn't earned it or any of that stuff. I'm all for it. But I just think it's short-sighted because I think the real fight is TJ Dillashaw and Cody Garbrandt, and I really want to see that fight more than anything else. But if Cody really is going to be out for a while, and I know Cody said maybe he'd be ready for UFC 214, I have a hard time believing that because I know what back injuries are like, and I have a hard time believing he's going to be healthy and ready to fight, 3 weeks after what he was scheduled to fight. But if they really, really can't do that, and they really, really aren't banking on that fight happening, and they're just going to let, maybe Dominic Cruz get a rematch or something like that, then yeah, TJ is the best possible option for this fight. Is it going to sell a ton more pay-per-views? No, but will it sell more than Ray Borg? Yeah. Do we have more belief that TJ Dillashaw, even cutting weight down to 125, has an actual shot at beating Demetrious Johnson more than Sergio Pettis or Ray Borg? No offense to them. Yeah. So I get it. I understand why they're trying to push for this fight. They're just pushing for it in the wrong ways. Listen, DJ's demands, about, money and all these different things he wanted, some of it maybe is a little bit much in terms of how much he's asking for, but I think that this was a negotiation gone wrong, and I think the UFC's paying for it in the court of public opinion right now because they're taking it on the chin. Now, the positive or the outcome of this will all depend on what happens next. Will Demetrious eventually accept the fight with TJ Dillashaw and fight him on August 19th in Seattle? If that happens, no matter what else is said, DJ kind of loses because everything he said he wouldn't do, he ended up doing. If he really does stand firm and says, I'm not taking this fight, I'm not fighting him no matter what, and he sits out, and then, some other dominoes have to begin to fall, whether that's stripping him of the title or any kind of other crazy things that happen, then it makes the UFC look bad. So right now the UFC's taking on the chin, but I think we have to kind of wait and see how things play out over the next couple of months to find out who really is the winner and loser in this kind of thing.
And there's obviously a lot more to discuss, and we'll see how things play out. But while you're talking about sort of, the way it could play out, one of the upsides I will say about this, and what makes this situation so crazy, because there's a lot of people people who go out and they complain about the UFC, they vent their frustration, they're not fans of Dana White. I mean, Cris Cyborg, Ally Quinta, Luke Rockhold, it's not... I think what makes this such a huge thing is because Demetrious Johnson, a guy who has been for so long, he was so guarded and so censored with his opinions. He was like the ultimate... Imagine if Rich Franklin came out and it was like, fuck the UFC, fuck this person, fuck you. You would be like, wow, what's going on, Rich? Like, it would be huge because he's such a nice guy. And I think it's the same thing with Demetrious Johnson. There are... You mentioned the court of public opinion and a couple of weeks ago, Demetrious Johnson, when this first came out and he would say, look, I don't want to take this TJ Dillashaw fight, a lot of people were hating on Demetrious Johnson. Now, it seems like a lot of people have turned around him. There are a lot of upsides from a fan perspective for Demetrious Johnson. He's gaining a lot of fans. People respect real, and people love when things are uncovered. And that's exactly what DJ has done here. He's exposed things. And when a guy, as careful with words as DJ finally uncorks, people love listening. I mean, we've all, us in the media, we know that Demetrious Johnson content, it's not the kind of stuff that's going to get you 1 million views, but all of the DJ content at the moment, I mean, he's trending like he's never trended before. And in this situation, even though it's something that happens quite often, he definitely comes off as a sympathetic figure, one who was wronged by his employer. It's a scenario that many people, blue collar or white collar, they can relate to. This is very much a stone cold Vince McMahon situation, and whether it's for the wrong reasons or right reasons, DJ at the moment is getting more exposure than he ever has for all of his fights, and more people sort of coming to his aid and coming to his side. So I think if there is any silver lining, sort of, again, we'll see what happens. We'll see if he is forced into some kind of fight. We'll see, who he ends up fighting and when and how. But he's probably going to bring a lot of fans with him just because of this. This has brought a lot of attention to not only him, but the flyweight division.
Yeah, and I think the reason why fans like it so much is he explained the reasoning behind some of the theories that he's got and some of the stuff that's been going on, which makes absolute sense. Damon, I just want to quickly get your thoughts on this. DJ said, if TJ doesn't make weight, I can't break the record for most consecutive title defenses, and they have denied paying me in that circumstance. He's referring to while negotiating about the fight, he wants the UFC to guarantee him a certain amount of money because he's afraid TJ Dillashaw isn't going to make the weight. Do you think some of his demands make sense? Do you agree with him having that kind of concern?
Well, I think he has legitimate concern because this is a new weight class for TJ Dillashaw. But, TJ Dillashaw is a professional. He's a wrestler. I mean, I think, he's already talking about he's walking around at 143 pounds. So he's taking this very seriously. And I think he knows that he would make weight. I think DJ has a legit gripe in terms of the guy never making the weight before. But listen, this is a big opportunity. This is a bigger fight. Now, like I said, will this fight sell 500,000 pay-per-views? I don't know about that, but will it sell better than Ray Borg or Sergio Pettis? Absolutely. So I think there's a balancing act with this. I think if I'm Demetrious Johnson, what I do is I tell the UFC, great. You want to put TJ Dillashaw on here? Awesome. I want to break the record, and I have no problem facing TJ Dillashaw. Here's the guarantees I want. I want to guarantee that he's going to make weight. And if he doesn't make weight, the fight is off and you still pay me my base pay. That would be my demand. Because then the fight's off. Because that's a bigger risk to me. Because then you're saying, not only do I want my pay, I want his pay as well. Okay, well, if a guy misses weight, they don't pay him regardless, but they still may pay his opponent if the fight gets canceled or, whatever the case may be. So just make that the stipulation. Great. He doesn't make weight, then we cancel the fight. And then you're taking a risk on putting on a pay-per-view without a main event. So if you're willing to say he's going to make weight, then great. Pay me my show money and I go home. Because if he can't make weight, I'm not defending my title. I'm not breaking the record. What's the point? That would be the demand I would make, not give me his paycheck on top of that and I'll take the fight. Just that in and of itself, just what happens when any other fighter misses weight and they can't fight. They usually pay the guy their show money. So that would be the demand. And I think at that point, not saying the UFC would kowtow to that or they would certainly cater to his demands, but I think that's a more realistic fight because guess what? When a guy misses weight, he has broken his contract. He is no longer contractually obligated for that fight. We just always hear the stories about the opponents accept it and they take the 20% fine or, whatever the case may be, but they're not obligated to take that fight. They can say, you know what? I don't want to fight this guy who came in overweight. DJ has every right to do that, except he should have a clause in his contract saying if he doesn't make weight, fight's canceled and I want my pay. If that happens, then I'm all for it.
You know what's interesting though? Like, I agree with what you're saying, but I feel like the UFC just refused. Like, the UFC could have come to an agreement like that with DJ. I feel like it was the early stages of negotiations, and the UFC just went, nah, negotiations are off the table. Like, okay, maybe DJ was aiming a little bit high, but when you negotiate, that's what you do. You throw out something high, and then whoever you negotiated with says, no, I want something lower, and then you kind of meet in the middle, and then you get what you want. So if DJ ended up getting what you're suggesting, Damon, which is, all right, he gets his show money, he doesn't have to take the fight, then I think that's understandable. And I thought that was one of the brilliant things that DJ and Matt Hume, I'm not sure which one, but one of them kind of made that point where they said, look, we want this guarantee, we want this kind of money. And the UFC said, look, you don't have to worry about that because TJ will make the weight. And he said, okay, if he doesn't make the weight, I want this money. And they said, well, we've got Ray Borg as a backup. And I think the best thing he says, well, is TJ making the weight or is he not making the weight? I mean, what is the point of having... Why are you so sure that TJ is going to make the weight and then you still have Ray Borg? And I think as a fighter, more specifically as a champion, on his level, Demetrious Johnson, he deserves an adequate time to prepare for a specific opponent. I don't think it's really fair to say, hey, you're a champion, you need to take on anybody, Ray Borg, on, 24 hours or 48 hours notice. This isn't 2006 where it's a tough man contest and people take fights on, 30 seconds notice. If you're debuting in the UFC and you're taking a short notice fight, and that's your ticket, then you have a lot less to lose. If you're a champion going for an all-time UFC record, you have everything to lose and zero incentive to take a short notice fight. So I agree with DJ that it's not really fair for them to say, well, if you don't fight TJ, fuck it, you'll fight Ray Borg instead. And I think the fact that before any of this negotiation could happen, Dana White said, all right, whatever, you want TJ's money, we're taking the whole flyweight division. And of course, I don't think anybody believes they'd really take the flyweight division away, but to even throw that out there, and then for that to bite him in the ass by DJ saying, hey, this is what he actually said, it makes Dana White and the UFC seem really stupid. What I want to ask you, though, Damon, a lot of people are questioning the flyweight division's worth. A lot of people are saying, well, some people are saying, oh, well, if they did take it away, would it really matter? And can the UFC take it away? Would they ever take it away? Again, I don't think anybody believes they would take it away, but what do you think about the division's worth at the moment? Because, look, while we're all talking about this situation sympathetically towards DJ, it is true that the flyweight division hasn't, been a massive draw or a success story. And it sounds like what DJ's saying is that they don't really want to promote the division. They've kind of given up on it a little bit.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. The flyweight division has not been a big draw, and I do counter Demetrious Johnson's point about not promoting the flyweights because I do believe they have promoted the flyweights. You don't go with it, and I know I work for Fox, so just to kind of put that out there. But you don't put flyweight title fights as main events on Fox for your television partner if you don't think it's going to draw ratings. You don't give them that spotlight. Demetrious has fought in the main event on Fox, I think 4 times. You're not throwing it on there just for the sake of throwing it on there because you got nowhere else to put him. You're putting him on there because you want to draw ratings, and he's had those kind of big events. I mean, he fought in January, which is always one of the biggest Fox events because they have the lead-in from the NFL, so they get a ton of extra publicity from the NFL games kind of leading into that. So I disagree with DJ on that one point where he says the flyweights haven't been promoted. They have been promoted in certain spots. I mean, they had two. They had the Season of the Ultimate Fighter that was promoted around the flyweight division. So they were doing that specifically to the flyweights. They've had DJ headlining 4 or 5 Fox cards, which again, those are not throwaway cards. That's a big opportunity to bring in a crowd. Unfortunately, people just have not been attracted to the flyweights, and I think part of the reason is that the smaller fighters in the men's divisions don't attract people as much. I've been arguing with a guy on Twitter all day about boxing when he's telling me the boxing has these massive draws in the lighter divisions, and I would say, yeah, there's some that are okay draws, but I'm saying like when you get below like 135 in boxing, even that traditionally their big pay-per-view draws have always been heavier guys until we got to like Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, and Oscar De La Hoya, guys like that. But when you cut below that, yes, they sell on HBO and Showtime, but are people willing to pay $40, $50, $60 to watch them fight? No. And so it's been that way in boxing as well. And so that's the problem. They're running into that. I think, again, what Demetrious is running into is he's a victim of his own success. I said this on my podcast yesterday, and I truly believe it now. To me, Demetrious Johnson is the Andre Ward of mixed martial arts. He's an amazing fighter. He's so talented. He dominates pretty much everyone he faces. He's undefeated as a flyweight, all this different stuff. But Andre Ward can't draw flies. I mean, the guy just cannot get a crowd. He cannot go on pay-per-view, all these different things. But what finally got people interested in Andre Ward and what we're about to see unfold was that this weekend or next weekend when he fights Kovalev for a second time, because Kovalev pushed him, ended up being a very close decision for Andre Ward. I think it should have been a draw, but now this rematch, maybe it's not going to be massively huge, but there's a real draw, real interest to that fight. And that's the problem Demetrious has had. He has no equals. He has nobody that, I mean, if he's fighting Ray Borg, and I love Ray Borg, but is he going to be favored? Is he going to be, are we really going to sit there and argue about that being a possible upset? Sergio Pettis the same way, and it's not offensive to them. It's just how far Demetrious has separated himself from everybody else. He's already beaten, Henry Cejudo. He already beat Joseph Benavidez twice. The only guy that really pushed him was John Dodson, and that's why there was a lot of attention being paid to their rematch. But unfortunately, again, Demetrious just outclassed him. So Demetrious just has no equals, and it's just not fun, no matter how good you are, to just watch a guy beat up the competition, to watch him go out there and maul guys for 3 rounds, 4 rounds. Yes, he's that much better, but when you just see it over and over again, it kind of loses something. You want to see somebody actually go out there and challenge him, and right now Demetrious doesn't have that, and I think that is ultimately what's hurting this division more than anything.
It's such a fascinating story. I mean, we'll have to stay on top of it, but I'm just interested to see what's going to happen next between Demetrious and the UFC, because I agree with you, Casper. I think this has definitely got him a lot more fans. He's definitely out there a lot more than he was before, and I think it's almost like promotion for his next fight when he does end up fighting. People are going to want to see what happens after all this goes down and settles down. But before we wrap up, we just want to quickly talk about UFC New Zealand that's happening this weekend. A lot of fun stuff down in New Zealand, a lot of fun fights. The first one, Cass, I want to get your thoughts and predictions on this co-main event on the card. Derek Brunson versus Dad's Army himself, friend of the program, Dan Kelly, a man who's been able to put an incredible streak together in the UFC and beat some huge names. Is the party going to continue at UFC New Zealand, or is Derek Brunson going to put a stop to it and be a bit of a party pooper?
I don't know, man. Somebody might spike the punch. Normally, I'd pick Brunson very confidently, but I'm curious as to where his mental state and confidence are at. Brunson, he exploded into 4 first-round knockouts, but then failed when he tried to do the same against Robert Whittaker. He seemingly changed his approach and tried a more tactical and reserved one against Anderson Silva, which saw him got robbed of the judges. So I'm curious, what kind of Brunson are we going to see this time? Where is his confidence at? How sure is he going to be of his approach against Dan Kelly? We all know that Dan Kelly gets better as the rounds go up, and so Brunson would probably be smart to finish the fight early if it's possible. We know Dan's very tough. If he doesn't, he runs the risk of getting into an ugly dog fight, which Kelly's been made famous for. Dan has some really decent takedown defense. He's got some sneaky trips and throws. He's really hard to hold down. Even if you do take him down, he pops back up generally, and he's got a very tricky and awkward striking style that's constantly improving. For a guy who really, people really used to lay into him about his striking, it's really improved to a point where it's actually useful for him in fights. I mean, he beat Rashad Evans on the feet in his last fight. And on paper, on a good day, I would say Brunson is a better, more active, less gun-shy version of Rashad Evans. He's younger, he's more explosive, he's quicker. And considering how close of a fight Rashad gave Dan, I think that Brunson could, potentially capitalize where Rashad fell short. I still give the edge to Brunson. I hate myself for it. I wanna pick Dan, but I have to be unbiased. Even though I'd love to see him win. He's obviously from Melbourne, Australia, where we are from. I think that you have to finish Dad's Army in order to stop the momentum. And so if Brunson's winning, I'm gonna say he does it via a first round KO.
Wow, there you go. I'm gonna go for Dan Kelly in this one. To me, obviously, Derek Brunson, he's got all the skills to beat Dan, but I believe you made a really good point, Cass. Mentally, where is he going to be? Dan Kelly, at the moment, he's the most confident he's ever been. And a confident Dan Kelly is a dangerous Dan Kelly. I wonder what kind of improvements we'll see in this fight. Even though Derek Brunson's best chance of finishing Dan is in the first round, it's very possible that it happens. To me, the feeling is, if I'm predicting this one, and please don't put a bet down on my prediction, but if I'm predicting this one, I believe Dan Kelly will win it either via decision or a stoppage in the 3rd round. The guy is just so awkward. When fighters get in there with them, they don't expect to deal with what they have to deal with, which is, like you mentioned, Casper, very awkward and different striking style. And a lot more skill in the grappling and in the clinch than people realize he has. I know his body's falling apart, but him going over to New Zealand and getting that co-main event spot, I think he's more focused than ever. I've been watching some of his training footage. It looks like he's getting better and better and better. And yeah, just the mental aspect of it, I think, is going to give him the edge in this one. Damon, quickly, your thoughts on this one. Are you behind Dad's army?
I would love to be behind Dad's army, and it's funny when I talked to Dan Kelly when he fought Rashad Evans. I told him when I interviewed him, I said, I kind of feel bad because I seemingly pick against you every single time you fight, and he just laughed. He's like, I'm used to it. But I just Derek Brunson is such an athlete. He does hit like a truck. And I just see Derek Brunson kind of going back to what got him to the race, what got him into that fight with Whitaker in the first place, getting really aggressive, just really going after Dan Kelly, kind of like what Sam Alvey did. I love Dan Kelly. I love what he brings to the sport, but I think this is just stylistically kind of a bad matchup for him, unless, like you mentioned, if he can get it into the later rounds, Derek has shown, a waning gas tank in the past, and Dan Kelly could kind of take over. So the longer this fight goes, the more it favors Dan Kelly, but I got to go with Derek Brunson.
All right, well, let's talk about the main event, Mark Hunt versus Derek Lewis. This is a fight I've been looking forward to for a really, really long time. This is going to be a lot of fun for everybody at the venue. It's going to end violently for one man, it seems like. But what man is that going to be, Damon? Do you think Derek Lewis continues his streak and makes his way to a potential title shot in the future? Or do you think Mark Hunt rebounds from that loss to Alistair Overeem and sort of gets some momentum and steam behind him once again?
I like Mark Hunt to win this fight. The biggest reason being is that Derek Lewis has struggled against guys who are strikers who just go out there to strike with him when they don't get caught in these scrambles to go to the ground where because if you look at Derek Lewis's, statistics in the UFC, I mean, the guy averages less than one takedown per fight, but when he gets guys down on the ground, he absolutely batters them and just bludgeons them on the mat. But when he has struggled is when guys are willing to stand with him. Now, he went 3 rounds with Roy Nelson, but I wouldn't say Roy Nelson is the most svelte guy in the world when it comes to his movement around the octagon. Neither is Mark Hunt for that matter, but I think how close that Derek Lewis fight with Roy Nelson is a bit more of what we're going to see in this fight. A guy who is going to go out there and strike with him, and I think Mark Hunt hits like a truck. Obviously, we know that. He still swings you with the same kind of momentum. He doesn't maybe have the chin he once had, so he has to be careful with that. But when Derek Lewis has struggled, the guys he's lost to in the past, Sean Jordan, Matt Mitrione, have been the guys that have gone there just looking to strike with him, and I think that's what he's going to face again this weekend. I love Derek Lewis. The guy's hilarious, one of my favorite interviews in the sport, but I just think right now this could be a bit of a bad matchup for him.
Exactly right. It's going to be really, really interesting. And I mean, Derek Lewis, what a character in the sport. If he is able to win this one, this would be a huge, huge win for him. Guys, we have to let Damon Martin go because we're running out of time. And then me and Casper will give our predictions and other thoughts on UFC New Zealand. But quickly, Damon, before we let you go, I just want to remind everybody that you do an amazing podcast called Fight Society every week. This week's episode has Stipe Miocic and Derek Lewis on it. I think everybody needs to check it out. Just quickly before we let you go, and everybody goes and checks out your podcast, Stipe spoke a little bit about wanting to fight Anthony Joshua in a boxing match. Just in a couple of words, tell us, is he being for real?
Yeah, that was actually my question. Are you serious? And he said he's 100%. He sounds like he wants to do it. He said Conor's doing it. Why not? He's got Golden Gloves experience, so it could be fun. Who knows? Like I said, I don't think it'll happen soon. I think if these guys keep winning, maybe one day. But, he seems serious about it, and why not? So, yeah, we talked to him about that. And, of course, we talked to Derek about his fight with Mark Hunt and then, so some other stuff. So, yeah, appreciate that. And it's a fun interview, and I appreciate anyone that gives a chance to listen to it.
Yeah, it's a great podcast, super underrated. Everybody needs to get behind it. You guys can check it out on SoundCloud or iTunes. Damon Martin always does an amazing job, and make sure to follow him on Twitter at Damon Martin, our buffet buddy. Who knows, maybe I'll get some extra turkey skin for you at UFC 214. Damon, thank you so much for coming onto the program.
Thanks for having me, boys.
You and your turkey skin. There's going to be turkey skin for everybody at UFC 214. They might as well just rename it to UFC Turkey Skin. UFC Turkey Skin Anaheim. Like back in the day, they'd have those names like UFC 71 Redemption, or like what all those kind of names. UFC 214 Turkey Skin.
I love it.
All right, let's finish off the show with actually, we've got a couple of things. You're going to be doing a bit of a cheeky review, a movie review. We won't tell you what you're doing yet, but we've got a few predictions for this UFC New Zealand card. Of course, we have to talk about the main event. Mark Hunt versus Derek Lewis. We got Damon's prediction. Dennis, do you have a prediction for us? Do you see a way that you see this fight playing out? What's going through your mind here?
Yeah, well, I think Damon has a really good point when he gave his prediction. I really feel like Mark Hunt's going to win this one. I actually think Hunt is going to finish this in the second or third round. Mark Hunt's footwork when it comes to striking really impresses me. I mean, to a lot of people, he looks really slow, but his footwork is just impeccable. And because this will be a battle on the feet, I just don't think Derek Lewis, he's improved a lot over his last few fights, but technically, I just don't think he's got the technique to go up against Mark Hunt in the striking department. Now, we don't know where Mark Hunt's chin is. He is a bit older, so we just don't know how much he's recovered. That loss to Overeem at UFC 209, that was a pretty brutal one. So he could get caught by Derek Lewis, but my prediction for this one is him finishing Lewis in the second or third round. What about you, Cass?
There's a few interesting X factors. Like, I get it. You look at it on paper and you think, oh, Mark Hunt's going to beat Derek Lewis. There is a skill gap between Derek Lewis and really the top guys at heavyweight. I don't want to sound like I'm counting him out. I mean, look, if he can beat Mark Hunt, let's be honest, if he does, his best chance is going to be via KO. Then it makes him a much more sellable guy as, someone who's got to punch his chance at winning the belt or beating anyone in the division. This is kind of like an unofficial title eliminator for Derek Lewis. Unfortunately, I don't think Mark Hunt, will be anywhere near the title, even if he does win, just because of his relationship with the UFC and the fact that, he's had a few tough losses. But this is a huge chance for Derek Lewis. The other thing is, you mentioned that Overeem knockout. Like, that was a brutal knockout, and he's coming back relatively quickly. So on top of being a little bit older, having all these wars, he had a granite adamantium chin for so many years. But you're right, people's chins crack, and we don't really know where Mark Hunt's chin is. Look, I mean, Alistair Overeem really can knock out anybody, so I don't think it takes away anything against Mark Hunt, but taking a fight so quickly against a guy who's known for, if anything, his knockout power, it makes things interesting. But much like you, look, I think Hunt's too quick and way too technical a striker. But like I said, if Lewis can knock out a K1 striker, it does a huge amount for him. Lewis always kind of seems to win fights he shouldn't. Like, Gonzaga had him on the ground and Derek beat him there. Roy Nelson wasn't able to KO him, even though Mitrione was able to KO the Black Beast and do it with ease. And then, the once technically threatening Travis Brown put on, a beating on him before Derek returned the favor. So at the end of the day, I think Mark Hunt, and here's the key, Mark Hunt's been facing the absolute killers in the heavyweight division. And respectfully speaking, Lewis is probably Hunt's least accomplished opponent since Chris Tucker. Hunt's just faced an absolute murderer's row of guys. He's faced much more skilled guys than Lewis. So you never know, maybe Lewis has made vast improvements, but I think while he's a fun brawler and he's got huge KO power, I think he'll miss, and I think Mark Hunt will catch him, and I think it's going to be a quick one. I think it's going to be a first round KO for the Super Samoan, and all of New Zealand will be celebrating.
I was also going to say, it's interesting because people never really talk about how old Mark Hunt is, but he is 43 years old, and that's really old considering he's been fighting for a really long time. He's had so many fights and he's taken a lot of blows to the head. And one of the things with Mark Hunt is I'm going to be curious to see what kind of shape he's in going into this fight, because I know in his UFC run, a lot of the time he's relied on his skill, and physically he wasn't really at a peak level, so he gassed. So I'm interested to see if he's, I suppose, realistic about the kind of shape he needs to be at 43 years old against a guy like Derek Lewis, because I'm expecting Derek to be in good shape for this fight. It could go longer than a lot of people expect. It could go longer than Mark Hunt expects. And, going off a loss like that, UFC 209, being 43 years old, you get to a point where you can't just rely on your skills and you have to be at a certain level physically. And I'm wondering if Mark Hunt is going to be in peak shape Mark Hunt or the Mark Hunt that we saw against Stipe in Adelaide. That's always the question. I'm always sort of wondering when he fights.
I wonder. Yeah, look, I mean, I know that Hunt's theory for that was he was new to weight cutting, and I think he didn't understand that he had to, from what he said, he didn't understand that he had to eat carbs afterwards. And so I don't know whether he was sort of on a ketogenic diet or he just ate, protein and fats. I know that from past experience, like when I've been on diets, like when I don't eat carbs, it's really hard to do anything like a performance sport. I'm obviously not an athlete. Like it's good if you want to go lift weights for an hour, but if you want to do something that's strenuous and you're actually fighting someone, it's really hard to get that extra energy, if you don't have the proper nutrition. And, Hunt doesn't exactly seem to me like a guy who's got, nutrition or weight cutting down to a science. I think he's learned from it since then. And it's interesting you mention Hunt having, being 43 and taking the damage that he has, because you're right, like, this isn't a guy who's 43, but he spent his whole career as a sort of wrestling type fighter who is able to avoid damage. I mean, he's had a lot of damage in the UFC, and before that, he came from K1, where the name of the game is to obviously not, the aim isn't to take damage, but you do take a lot of damage. It is striking. There's really no way to escape it. And he's had wars. He's famous for the ones where he took the most damage. So it's pretty respectable and commendable to see that he's still fighting at 43. But looking at the card overall, Dennis, it's only the second time the UFC has come back to New Zealand. Auckland fans are pretty lucky. These people, from everything that we've heard from all the fans, they've been expecting this and awaiting it for a very long time. And this is the first UFC in there since June 2014, UFC Fight Night Tahuna versus Marquardt. What do you think of this card in general? Anything else that the fans need to know of? I know obviously a lot of the people in the States, they may not know as much about some of the Kiwi fighters, some of the local fighters. Maybe there's some fights that people are sleeping on. What excites you about this card?
And I actually think this is a pretty good card. I think the people in New Zealand are in for a fun night of fights, and there's a few fights on there that are really interesting to me. I mean, I'm really interested to see Dan Hooker versus Ross Pearson. I mentioned it before, but Dan Hooker, he has a big following in New Zealand, and it will really only sort of take him a decent kind of win to get the steam rolling behind him. He lost against Jason Knight over in Melbourne, but apparently, this is a different Dan Hooker. He's moving up weight classes, and he's taking on Ross Pearson, and this could be the beginning of a new run. So I'm excited to see that and see what happens with that there. Volkanovski is someone Alexander Volkanovski is someone in the featherweight division people don't really know much about, but this is a man that's been on his way to the UFC for a really, really long time. The reason why he's such a brutal fighter is because not only has he only lost one fight in his entire career, but most of his fights finish with TKOs. I mean, this is a guy that has incredible power in the featherweight division. I really believe that he will be one of the big names in the featherweight division in the near future because he's such an exciting fighter and he can deliver such great matchups. So he's fighting Hirota, and that's going to be an interesting one, and I predict that to finish pretty early. Tim Elliott's fighting Ben 10, and I actually think that's going to be a really fun fight as well. And Tim Elliott comes in and he mixes things up really, really nicely, and this is an opportunity for Ben 10 to bounce back against a pretty a pretty well-known guy, and a guy who did really, really well against Demetrious Johnson in his last outing. So that's a pretty good matchup too. What about you, Cass? Any fights stand out to you?
It's actually kind of funny because those are the two that really stand out. There's a couple more, but you mentioned Alex Volkanovski and Mizuta Hirota. Flow Sports or Flow Combat, they actually did a great little interview with Alexander Volkanovski. Check it out if you haven't seen it, where he talks about how he's a former rugby player. Rugby is kind of like, for those who don't know, I don't think most people do, it's kind of like NFL, but there's less padding and I think the shorts are a lot shorter. And he has diamond in his hands. What's the featherweight limit? I think the conversion, I always think 145 pounds, but I think it's like 66 kilos. He used to be 97 kilos. 97. So he was like, actually that's technically heavyweight, because light heavyweight I think is like 93.5 kilos. Or something like that. So 97, technically he was walking around at heavyweight. So it's crazy to see him that much smaller. And he's a guy, he actually has a lot of plans. He wants to fight at lightweight and he wants to fight at bantamweight as well. So it's interesting to see where this will take him. You mentioned the single loss. Hirota has never been knocked out. So this could potentially be a really, really fun war, kind of like the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. Hirota's sort of a Japanese legend who's had a lot of success in Japan, but his UFC record, it's not the greatest. It stands at 1 win, 3 losses, and 1 draw, and that's after 2 runs in the UFC. So, he's coming off a win over Cole Miller, a fairly dejected Cole Miller, so it kind of seems to me like the UFC are hoping to give Volkanovski an addition to the highlight reel. So I'm going to guess that Volkanovski is going to win a decision after a thrilling war, but man, I think if you're sleeping on this fight, that is foolish because I think it's going to be a good one. You mentioned Tim Elliott versus Ben Nguyen. That's another fun one. I think, Ben Nguyen, he's just facing killers. He was supposed to fight Joseph Benavidez. They say, all right, Joseph Benavidez is out. Unfortunately, tore his ACL. You got Tim Elliott instead. That's by no means an easier challenge. Like you mentioned, the second most recent challenger to Demetrious Johnson's title. So I think this is a huge opportunity for Ben 10. I think, look, realistically, Tim Elliott, he's so good with his wrestling, and Ben 10, his takedown defense, he's really going to have to work hard on it. I don't know if it's really there. I'm seeing Tim Elliott beating him, grinding out a dominant decision, but man, it's a great one. We've also got Ashkan Mokhtarian is a man who's making his UFC debut in the flyweight division, so you got to hope that, you know, the flyweight division sticks around. Come on, Dana White. Don't rid it when our very own Ashkan Mokhtarian. Funny story here. One of our videographers, Christian Ciccini, Ashkan's actually a guy that he trains with. He's good friends with him. Christian's sort of been handling a lot of things to do with him and the UFC. And from our man Christian, he says that, first of all, John Moraga's a pretty crazy and stiff test for a guy making his UFC debut, but apparently Ashkan was saying things like he wants Sergio Pettis, he wants Joseph Benavidez, give him anyone. So he's got a lot of belief in himself, but apparently our man Christian says that Ashkan's got some crazy submissions to do with the legs. He's got some crazy leg locks when he's on top, so look out for that. If you want to put a cheeky bet, maybe put down Ashkan Mokhtarian via submission, maybe via leg lock early in the fight. So there's a lot of fun stuff there as well. You got Damian Brown, our local guy. There's a lot of fun fights here.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he's got an incredible story, Ashkan. So we'll see what happens. It'll be great to get him on the show soon. And Alex Volkanovski and a lot of these guys. We haven't had an opportunity to have him on the show soon, but don't worry, guys. We're definitely looking out for an opportunity to get him on, get him to tell their story. We have had Damian Brown on before, but I'm sure he'll be on the program once again. Dan Hooker hasn't been on the program yet, so it'll be great to get him on. There's a lot of names that we'd be excited to get on the program, so look out for that. But Cass, before we wrap up the proceedings, I've got a sneaky movie review. Are you ready for me to share it with everybody?
I'm ready, man. Lay it on me and everyone else.
Well, I watched Wonder Woman, which has been an absolute smash hit critically. Rotten Tomatoes gave it something like 97%.
Were you in that Texas screening? I know they had one where only women were allowed, and a lot of people were upset. Did you sneak over to Texas and sneak into that one like a sneaky bandit?
Well, I had my wig, I had my dress planned. I was going to match my shoes, but then, my flight was delayed and I missed it. Then I had to fly all the way back to Melbourne because I was going to miss work the next day.
I thought you were going to say my fly was undone and they realized I wasn't a woman.
Summer nights, what can I say? But, I saw they did that. And it's interesting because a lot of people see this movie as a movie where you can sort of take your daughter, or it's a great sort of empowering women for women out there sort of looking for a role model. To me, it's kind of like I'm not empowered by gender, I'm empowered by storyline. So like when I watched Wonder Woman, like I wasn't empowered, but I was inspired, I was happy. Just because she's a chick, it doesn't mean that she doesn't inspire me. And flip side of it, it's sometimes I think it's a bit silly. Like I think we can find inspiration in stories and what happens. But anyway,
if you're a woman, you can be inspired by Thor or the Incredible Hulk. There's no reason why you can't.
That's safe to say. That's right. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. That's the other crazy thing. I just don't know. I don't know what women find attractive. I was going to say Ben Affleck as Batman probably isn't attracted to him, but maybe I'm just a guy with bad standards for other guys. I don't know. Who knows? But back to the review. Look, I watched this movie. I saw the high review that Rotten Tomatoes gave the high review beforehand, and I heard some really, really good reviews from other people who have watched it that I've spoken to. So my expectations were high going into this one. I really like Chris Pine. I'm a big fan of his. I really think a lot of the movies that he's in sort of creates a fun vibe, and he can really deliver when it comes to the acting. So he definitely delivered when it came to playing his part. He was one of the main characters in the story. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, so I don't want to say what happens. But I found the movie to be a really, really, really enjoyable movie. And it's one of probably the first DC movie that I've enjoyed for years? I mean, the last ones I really enjoyed were the Christopher Nolan sort of Batman ones. So,
yeah.
So that's a long time ago because Suicide Squad, I watched it. I didn't like it. Yeah, I didn't like it. Like, I enjoyed a couple of parts from it. Like, I like Will Smith but the whole thing was stupid, and we all know Batman vs Superman. It was just like absolutely dreadful, and
yeah,
I just don't know how people dig it. So with this one, I was really impressed. I'm still not a fan of how DC shoot their movies. Sometimes it kind of looks a little bit like a TV show, just like I don't know, like the brightness is a bit off, and the quality is a bit off, and to me sometimes it looks a little bit shoddy. But I thought it was a very, very enjoyable plot with. I didn't think Wonder Woman was going to be the movie that they were going to be able to pull off, because they couldn't do it with such substantial characters like Batman and Superman. I'm like, what are they going to do with Wonder Woman? And they were able to come up with a very, very smart script. They didn't cut any corners in this movie, which they love to do. They love to cut all their corners and just sort of get to the point where the storyline makes them the most money. They didn't do that with this. they kept a lot of like other characters out of it, which I thought was good. So they didn't sort of try and mash in all these characters just to make it work and get more people to go in and watch it. And overall, it was a very enjoyable ride, and sort of getting me a little bit more not excited for Justice League, but a bit more like excited for where the DC franchise can go in the future. Because I think they got this movie out and they realize, all right, we kind of have a bit of a formula of what we can do with characters, but I'm still curious to see what they're going to be able to do, especially with Justice League coming out right around the corner. And I don't believe they've set enough stories up to do a Justice League movie just yet, and I think the whole thing is rushed. But anyway, my score for the movie with Timothy Johnson mustaches, I'll give it 3.5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. I really enjoyed it. It's not the greatest superhero movie I've ever watched. I know a lot of people are saying it's definitely in their top 2 greatest superhero movies of all time. It wasn't that for me, but it was a very, very enjoyable ride. And I mean, Wonder Woman is so attractive. At the end, I don't know, you look around your life, you're like, wow, why doesn't everybody look like Wonder Woman? But, you know, like when you watch a screen, you watch someone that's just ridiculously attractive. Just like, how does this, because, you know, how do I pronounce her name, Cass?
I think it's Gal Gadot.
Gal Gadot, yeah. Her background, you know, she was she's from Israel. I think she was like a Miss Universe contestant, and she was in the military, because everybody in Israel has to do some time in the military. But she was like a combat trainer, and she worked with guns and stuff like that. It's like, can it be any more attractive? You know, she's a beautiful woman who knows how to fight smart, and is a great actor on screen. And I'll be honest, I wasn't a big fan of her in the Fast and the Furious movies. You know, she always looked good, but she just never really stood out to me. But here she really delivers in the performance. So yeah, just great. Oh, and I wasn't a fan of her in Batman vs Superman either. So there you go. The whole thing just turned around for me. 3.5 Timothy Johnson mustaches.
Oh, there you go. Not quite as kind as Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who I think gave 6, was it, or 7, or maybe 10.
Stephen's going to the movies alone. You know, his knee's healing up. It's different. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think he's a kind guy that gives good amounts of mustaches to people.
Yeah, that's true. He's a good guy. I'd love to get Stephen in the fold in the future for movie reviews. I mean, Damon's great, but, you know, could you imagine you, me, Damon, Stephen, some turkey skin, Timothy Johnson mustaches flying all over the place? I think it could be a lot of fun. Before the show gets really, really seriously off the rails, I think that's enough. I think that's enough for this week. If you've enjoyed the show, don't be afraid to jump on iTunes. Give us a cheeky review. Give us how many stars you want. Write whatever you want. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, on Facebook, facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. We are very contactable. If you want to email us, info@submissionradio.com. And if you are watching on YouTube, definitely drop some comments in the comment section below about pretty much everything that has been discussed. Talk about the Lorenz Larkin interview. There's a lot of fun things there. Are you a fan of this gorilla lion hybrid? Lorenz Larkin, clearly not a fan. Are you a fan? Talk to us about Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He spoke about a whole bunch of things there. Who do you want to see him fight next? Of course, Coach Wink, he spoke about a bunch of things. Give us your predictions. John Jones, Daniel Cormier, we're obviously going to be talking about that a whole lot more in the future, and we're going to be attending that event as well. And the Demetrious Johnson situation, by all means, flood the comment section with your opinions on that. We love hearing what you guys think. And yeah, it's going to be a bunch of fun. We're going to be enjoying reading all your comments, and we'll catch you guys next week.